Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku's luck took a turn for the better, part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. 𝐼𝐚𝐻𝐺𝐠. It was the end of the school day at 𝗲𝗵𝗄 Middle School, and the students were happy for their upcoming release. No one is more so happy about this than Izuku Midoriya. Alright, kids, remember that tomorrow is our field trip to Jaku Hospital. The teacher told them as the students packed up and started to leave. By the time the teacher had finished talking, Izuku was already out the door, being the first one to leave, as usual. After all, no one else packed their things like their life depended on it. Of course, that would only buy him so much time. Bakugo would catch up to him if that was all there was to his leaving school routine. Izuku made a hard left, away from the exit, and down the opposite hallway, where he found his usual hiding spot, the janitor's closet. He swiftly, yet quietly, opened the door and entered the small, dark closet, taking his favorite spot right next to the mop. Alright, now I just have to wait 10 minutes and everyone should be gone, Izuku thought. Thankfully, he didn't have to stay here for as long as he used to. Most of the people that antagonized him didn't think he was worth the trouble to go look for him in order to torment him. And the ones that did go out of their way gave up not too long after he started hiding. Even Bakugo didn't hate him enough to spend more than 10 minutes searching the school just to be mean to him. In the meantime, Izuku took out his notebook, a pencil, and a dim light, bright enough that he would be able to see and write stuff down in his notebook, but not bright enough to give his hiding spot away. On the news yesterday, I saw Hawk stop a villain that was completely in his blind eye, Izuku thought as he rapidly wrote down his thoughts. Can Hawks tell the positions on things or people with his feathers? Actually, Hawks goes on a lot of covert and undercover missions. Maybe that's why. Can he hear things through them like ears, or are they more like echolocation? Ah yes, Izuku's favorite activity. Quirk speculation and analysis. They were pretty in-depth and time-consuming things to be in, but it helped Izuku pass time, and helped keep his mind off the fact that he had no friends. The time flew by, and before Izuku knew it, 10 minutes had passed. Izuku peeked his head out of the closet, cautiously looking around before taking his leave. And as usual, he ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. After all, if he slowed down, who knew what might catch up to him? A few minutes later, back home, Izuku entered into his apartment, and as he closed the door behind him, he finally took a sigh of relief. Finally, safe. 𝐭𝐸 wasn't home, of course. She was typically still working at the hospital by this time, but she would be back in a couple of hours. Thankfully, I don't have any more injuries for her to patch up, Izuku thought as he walked to his room. Back when Izuku was younger, or heck just a year ago, Izuku getting injured was the equivalent of the sky being blue. It was just kind of the status quo after he was deemed quirkless, and as the years went by, his accidents got worse and worse, to the point where his mother had to start having medical supplies in their house. Fortunately, Izuku had learned to be more careful, and these accidents became far more sparse. He entered his All Might covered room, throwing his All Might themed backpack onto his All Might themed computer chair, took off his surprisingly not All Might themed sneakers, and collapsed onto his All Might themed covers on his All Might themed bed. He did it. He did it perfectly. He pulled off his routine without a hitch. He ran and hid like a coward. Izuku sighed as he looked up at his hero posters. You don't see heroes running and hiding. They stand up to wrongdoings. And here I am, glad that I was able to hide in a closet, right? He would cry at the realization of how pathetic he's become. But he'd had the realization and cried those tears far too many times already. This was a routine, all right, and therefore, it happened regularly. This was just his life now, and he absolutely hated it. I just wish I could be someone like you, Izuku said, looking up at his All Might poster. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Fuku Hospital was to most people a good place. A place that helped thousands of people get treated for injuries, diseases, and other terrible things. And to most people, Kyudai Garaki was a good man. One of the few examples of a notable quirkless person in a quirk-obsessed society. A man who would help people in spite of his condition. But the hospital and its owner held a dark secret, because hidden below it was an evil lab. No, really. And Dr. Garaki was secretly an associate of the most powerful villain in history, All for One, whom he was currently in a call with right now. It escaped, said the supervillain through the computer monitor, its light illuminating the dim room. Yes, it appears I underestimated its intelligence, and after the latest round of experimentation, it escaped, Garaki reported, petting his favorite Namu as it rested on his lap. It's quite smart for a spider, isn't it? This is unfortunate news. I had a great interest in that particular Namu. All for One lamented. Ah yes, the quirk to pass on one's abilities by injecting its venom into a person could be quite the valuable asset if I could learn how to replicate its quirk, Dr. Garaki said. But do not fear, I doubt it has left the hospital. Hopefully, we'll find it soon. I sincerely hope so, Doctor. All for One told him. It would be quite troublesome if that spider were to bite a hero. Imagine, a hero with the abilities of an augmented spider. A hero like that would be quite troublesome. The next day, and this is the morgue. This is where we store the dead bodies until the families come to claim them, said a very broad doctor to a very broad class. The class trip had gone, as expected, with no showing any interest, including their guide and teachers. Izuku was probably the only one actually paying attention, if only because he wanted to see if he could learn how to patch himself up so his mother didn't have to. However, even Izuku's attention started to waver, as the person speaking clearly didn't care. I wonder how many heroes have been in this hospital? I don't hear about a lot of heroes coming here. It's kind of weird considering how famous this place is. Maybe this place is ill-equipped to heal people with more powerful quirks. No, that can't be it. There are plenty of people with powerful quirks that aren't heroes, so this hospital would have to heal them. And there are quite a few heroes with less than powerful quirks. Although I guess my knowledge about those heroes is lacking. Izuku thought, although little did he know, his thoughts were leaking out in the form of muttering. Shut the hell up, Deku, Bakugo shouted at his most hated classmate, igniting his palms for intimidation. Sorry, I didn't mean to mutter. Izuku put his hands in front of his face in defense. Please, no quirks in the hospital, please. The doctor scolded Bakugo, still not caring. 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿. Bakugo glared at Izuku for a few moments, before turning towards the rest of the group. After a few moments, Izuku gave a sigh of relief and followed the group as they moved on through the hospital's halls. But little did anyone know that while Izuku was distracted with this little altercation, a spider, no bigger than a grape, crawled onto him and up his pant leg. As Izuku moved with his class, the spider climbed higher and higher up Izuku's body. I wonder if All Might has ever had to go to the hospital? Izuku wondered. The spider reached his torso. Maybe a few times. I doubt it's more than a handful. After all, what could get through his near-impervious skin? Izuku asked himself. The spider crawled through Izuku's sleeve. I wonder if his quirk also boosts his immune system. Izuku pondered. If that's the case, he may never had to go to the hospital since he was 5. The spider crawled onto the back of Izuku's hand, and that's when it bit him. Izuku shouted, as suddenly it felt like his hand was on fire. He looked down at his hand and wondered what could be causing this pain, and saw the little spider pumping its venom into him. Midoriya. His teacher called to him, and the entire class looked at him with varying expressions, but Izuku had other things to focus on. 𝐒𝐻. Midoriya hit the back of his hand against the wall, squashing the spider and killing it instantly, reducing it to paste. But that didn't make the pain any better. Izuku felt the burning sensation not only get worse but spread, from his hand to his arm and soon to the rest of his body. 𝐒𝐻. What the fuck are doing, Deku? Bakugo barked at Izuku. I spider. Bit me. Poison. Izuku's legs suddenly went numb, and he fell back onto the floor. Poison? Asked one of the students looking concerned. 𝗧𝗵𝗄. He's just being a crybaby, laughed another student. I don't know, look at him, he looks like he's dying, said another student. Deku. Bakugo's aggression faded, as Izuku laid on the floor, his eyes closing. Deku. 𝗂𝐴𝐾𝐸𝐿. The last thing Izuku heard before passing out was the doctor calling for help. Sometime later. Oh, what? What happened? Izuku opened his eyes, and after taking a few seconds for his eyes to get adjusted to the light, he was met with the sight of pure white walls and a pure white ceiling. I'm in a hospital room. Izuku looked around and confirmed his statement. He had an IV drip in his arm, and he was dressed in a hospital gown. Why am I? Oh right, the poison. Izuku cringed as he remembered the burning pain that went through his body. It's like that spider had set his blood on fire. Shaking his head to rid himself of those thoughts, he then looked down at his arms. It seems like whatever happened is over. I guess the poison worked its way out of my system, Izuku thought. But something just wasn't right. His body felt strange. Not bad, just strange. Izuku didn't have time to think about that, as the door suddenly opened and himself walked in. Oh good, you're awake, said as he walked up to the young boy. Dr. Garaki, what happened to me? Izuku asked the doctor. Well, you were poisoned by a spider. What kind of poison and what kind of spider is unknown, unfortunately, but fortunately it wasn't lethal. It did, however, cause you to go into a coma for a week, the doctor revealed. A week? Izuku shouted in surprise. I'm asleep for a week. Oh God, Mom must have been so worried. Ah yes, your mother visited quite a few times, and we'd had to mop the floors from the trails of tears she left each time. Dr. Garaki explained. I suppose you, her, and the janitorial staff will be happy to hear that you have a clean bill of health, and you'll be released later today. What really? Izuku was shocked. He didn't think one could recover from being in a coma so quickly. Yes, it was quite surprising. Told him. He recovered very quickly, but either way, we'll give you one last checkup, and then you can be on your way. Oh okay. Thank you, sir. Izuku gave the doctor a polite bow. The doctor smiled. There was no issue. After all, you were quite an interesting patient. Later that night, Izuku and 𝐭 were happy to be home. 𝐭 had to spend 10 minutes outside the hospital, hugging Izuku and crying onto his shirt, just so that way she could focus on driving them home. After the two of them entered their house, Izuku immediately noticed a lovely aroma in the air. Is that Katsuden? A rare, genuine smile broke its way onto Izuku's face as he ran into the kitchen to see his favorite meal ready and on the table. It wasn't until this moment that Izuku realized he was absolutely starving. 𝐭 walked in and saw the joy on her son's face and smiled. I thought you might be hungry, so I made your favorite. We should eat now before it gets cold. Izuku did not need to be told twice. The two sat down and started eating, but Izuku was absolutely destroying his katsuden, eating it way faster than normal, and that was saying something. Izuku, calm down. You're going to choke, 𝐭 warned him. But by the time 𝐭 told him this, Izuku had already finished his bowl. Sorry. Izuku apologized as he moved on to his second bowl. For some reason I'm just really hungry. After a week in a coma, I suppose that's to be expected, 𝐭 told her son. After finishing his second bowl, Izuku looked up and noticed something. The trash was overflowing. Not only that, but there were 4 trash bags lying next to it. Mom, why is there so much trash? Izuku asked his mother, looking at her with concern. Were you not taking care of yourself? Were you stress eating again? Mom, you know that's not healthy. 𝐭 blushed with shame. I know, but I was so worried about you. No one knew what kind of poison you were injected with or what it was doing to you. They kept saying you were okay, but you weren't waking up. No more than 5 seconds into her explanation, 𝐭 had started crying. It was a wonder how she had any tears left after crying so much. But it was the Midoriya family's hidden quirk. Unlimited tears. Izuku quickly made his way to his mother, hugging her and comforting her some more. After a few minutes, Izuku helped his mother up. Maybe you should go to bed. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. I'm very tired, but first I should take out the trash, 𝐭 said, looking at the buildup of trash. I'll do that. Don't worry about it, Mom. Izuku reassured her. But you just woke up from a coma. 𝐭 objected. I can't let you do that. No, Mom, it's fine. Izuku quickly moved over to the trash and picked it all up. It's really light. The trash bags felt like they had practically nothing in it, but Izuku knew they were full, and from the look of it, had some stuff that should have made them decently heavy. And it's not like Izuku worked out, so it should have been a struggle just to carry 2 of them with both hands. But it felt like he could carry all 4 of them with one hand with no issue. That's weird. Izuku didn't have a lot of medical knowledge, but he was pretty sure getting stronger after being in a coma was the opposite of what was supposed to happen. Izuku shook his head to clear his thoughts. I can worry about that later. He looked at his mother, who was also confused by Izuku's sudden strength, but way more worried about it than he was. Izuku, are you okay? Yeah, actually I feel pretty good. Izuku still didn't know what was happening to his body. He'd felt weird ever since he woke up. And while the feeling, he decided, was a good one, it was still one he was unsure to and unsure why it was present. But the last thing he wanted to do was worry his mother about this. I'll take out the trash, you just go to bed, Izuku told her. 𝐭 was about to say something, but VWOSH. Suddenly at speeds 𝐭 couldn't even comprehend. Izuku was out the door. After a few moments of shock, 𝐭 had one question in his mind. Does Izuku have a quirk? Back with Izuku. Izuku was at the dumpster that was located all the way at the bottom of the stairs to his apartment, which was about a 2-minute long walk, a minute long run on average. But Izuku had just been in his house a second ago. What? How? That? It was all just. Izuku struggled to think straight after that experience. Brief it may have been. It was all a blur to him. He just ran like he normally did. But everything went by so much faster. Before he realized it, he was already at his destination. It was like he had super speed. What is going on? Izuku was now 100% sure that something was wrong. Something about him was wrong. Or maybe not wrong, but different. I lifted heavy trash bags and they felt like nothing. I moved from my house to the dumpster in a second. Izuku looked down and realized that in his surprise, he let go of the trash bags. Or at least, he stopped grabbing them, but the trash bags were still stuck to his palms. Izuku moved his hands around him, testing to see if the bags would fall, but they didn't. And it's not as if the trash bags were sticky. He could feel if they were sticky. And they definitely weren't sticky. And now my hands are sticky. Why are they sticky? They weren't sticky before. Is it because I wanted to grab something? How do I unstick? Izuku thought. Unstick. Come off. Release. Nothing happened. Izuku shook his hands around trying to get the garbage bag off his hand. He tried to pull the garbage bag off his hand with his other hand, and after a bit of effort it worked. But then it got stuck to that hand. Okay, calm down, Izuku. Izuku told himself, taking deep breaths as he tried to compose himself. Izuku released the tension in his hand, and then the garbage bags fell out of it. What happened? Was it because I relaxed my hand? Izuku asked himself as he looked at his now empty palm. Izuku thought about this for a moment before looking up at the nearby wall and then back at his hand. He slowly approached the wall and then put his hand on it. His hand tensed, and when he tried to pull away crack, he took some of the wall with him. Izuku would have freaked out about that if he didn't come to the realization of something that would change his life forever. I have a quirk. It took a few moments for Izuku's mind to process that statement, getting past the sheer disbelief and denial echoing in his head. But when it did, tears tread familiar trails down his cheeks. But this time, for the first time in years, they were happy tears. A goofy grin covered his face as an overwhelming joy filled his heart. I have a quirk. Izuku jumped into the air in celebration, but his jump ended up being way higher than he thought, in that he jumped halfway up the very tall building. And then he started to fall. Whoa, Izuku shouted as he fell. And then suddenly he felt a strange buzzing in his head. Ground incoming. I know, Izuku shouted at whatever was alerting him of the fact that the ground was getting closer and closer. Thinking quickly, Izuku put his hand on the wall, stopping his fall as his hand stuck to the building. Phew, Izuku took a sigh of relief as he hung off the side of the building. Okay, now what do I do? He was stuck. If he let go, then he would fall, which might not kill him, but he didn't know that for sure. Okay, maybe I can crawl to the ground, Izuku asked himself. After pulling up his courage, Izuku stuck his other hand onto the wall, sticking it just like the first hand, and then he tried to stick his feet to the wall. And that's where he had a problem. His shoes. Try as he might, Izuku could not get his feet to stick on the wall, and he quickly realized the problem was with his shoes. Okay, so my skin has to make direct contact with a surface to stick to it. That makes sense, Izuku analyzed. He started trying to kick his shoes off his feet, and after a few seconds he managed to do it, causing his shoes to fall to the ground. After peeling his socks off his feet using his toes, his feet were finally exposed. In the moment of truth, Izuku brought his feet to the wall, and they stuck. Seconds later, Izuku started crawling around on the walls, tensing and relaxing his hands very slowly and carefully as to make sure he didn't make a mistake and fall. The overjoyed smile returned to his face as Izuku neared the ground. This is so cool. After a bit more wall crawling, Izuku made it to the ground and got back up. I can crawl on walls, Izuku exclaimed excitedly, this time being careful not to celebrate it too hard. I wonder how that works. Izuku started touching his hand, feeling around for anything different. Maybe it's 𝗧𝗵𝗶. When Izuku pressed down the bottom of his palm, and from his wrist shot out a web that latched onto the wall. Izuku froze for a moment before looking up at where the web had stuck to the wall, and then looking down the web that connected all the way to his wrist. There was now a hole in his wrist where the web was coming out of. He stopped pressing down on his palm with his finger, and the hole closed, cutting off the web. I can shoot webs. Izuku with a mixture of excitement and confusion. It took a few moments, but as Izuku reflected on his abilities, he realized something and slowly started to piece things together. I can climb up walls, shoot webs, I have super strength and super speed. I have all the abilities of a spider. I got these powers after I got bit by a strange spider that filled me with an unknown venom. Did that spider give me a quirk? Izuku realized. Can that happen? I know animals can have quirks, but could there really be a quirk like that? But that's the only thing I can think of. How else could I get a quirk? Maybe the reason I was in a coma was because my body was adjusting to this new mutation. After a bit more thinking, Izuku put those thoughts aside, and the smile returned to his face. That doesn't matter right now. I have a quirk. Wanting to test out his new abilities immediately, Izuku looked up at the floor where his apartment was located, about 30 feet up. He raised his hand up and started aiming. 𝗧𝗵𝗶. Izuku pressed down on his palm using his middle and ring fingers, and a web shot out of his wrist and flew up into the air, landing on the floor Izuku was aiming at. The green-haired boy's smile grew even wider as he jumped up, pulling on the web so it would bring him exactly where he wanted to go. Once he got close, he grabbed the handrail and flipped over it before landing on his feet. Whoa, it wasn't a perfect landing, and it took Izuku a second to gain his balance. But it was a far better acrobatic feat than anything Izuku had done before. Do I have super reflexes too? This is amazing. I need to tell Mom about this. He turned around and opened the door. However, in his excitement, he used too much force and pulled the door off its hinges. Izuku thought of a way to fix this before his mom saw it. Wait, Izuku walked in, put the door back in place, and then started webbing it up until the door was stuck in place. There, we might have some problems getting out, but at least no one can break in. Izuku thought aloud. Izuku, is that you? 𝐭𝐸 ran in, having heard the sound of her door being broken. She stopped and looked on in confusion at her webbed-up door. What eep? Mom, that spider gave me a quirk. Izuku ran up to his mother and grabbed her so fast she didn't even see him move. Also, we need a new door. 𝐭 was frozen for a few moments before fainting of shock in her son's arms. Mom, after eventually waking 𝐭 up, the two got on the couch and moved to talking about this new predicament, and then 𝐭 came to a shocking conclusion. You can't use it, 𝐭 told him firmly. What? Izuku almost jumped off the couch in shock. What do you mean I can't use it? Why not? Mom, do you know what this means for me? People will stop bullying me. 𝐭 might actually like me again. I'll finally be able to become a hero. But what if it's temporary? 𝐭 asked him, giving him a sad and concerned look. Immediately, Izuku deflated, and his pupils shrunk in despair as he realized what his mother was talking about. This was not, technically speaking, his quirk. It was an effect of the spider's quirk, or at least that's what they assumed. And quirk effects were not always permanent. Most of the time they weren't. So that meant that his newfound power might be short-lived. All the excitement drained from Izuku, and 𝐭's heart broke as she saw her son's face fall. But she knew that it was better to bring this to his attention now, because if she let him freely use his quirk and train with it, only to lose it in a week or two, then he would be crushed. Let's just wait a month, 𝐭 told him, trying to put some hope back into him. If it is temporary, then it would have worn off by then. If you still have it, then it's probably permanent, and you'll be free to use it however you'd like. Izuku clenched his fist tightly as if trying to physically hold on to the hope that this would last, that it wouldn't just be a cruel joke. I understand. Also, I know you'd want to go out of your way to help people with your quirk, but remember that you don't know how to use it yet, 𝐭 warned him. With that much power, you could end up hurting someone very badly if you're not careful. If you see someone in danger, just let the heroes handle it, sweetie. Again, another good point that Izuku didn't like at all. Yes, Mom. And one last thing, dear. 𝐭 hated that she had to say all this, but she knew she needed to. Don't tell anyone at school about your quirk. We both know what they'll do if you show it off, and then lose it later. Oh God, he could only imagine. The only reason the discrimination and bullying was bearable right now is because it stopped being the most amusing thing in the world to them. If he lost his quirk after showing it off, then it would renew interest in him and give them all something new to throw in his face. Once again, another good point that he didn't want to hear. At this point, Izuku was just standing there with his head held low, looking more defeated than he had in a while. 𝐭 stood up and grabbed Izuku's shoulders. Izuku, look at me. Izuku slowly lifted his gaze up to meet 𝐭's and saw her smiling lovingly at him. We don't know if they're temporary. They might be permanent, 𝐭 told him. And if they're not, it's not the end of the world. You could still be a doctor. They save people. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. Not that Izuku didn't respect doctors. He absolutely did. His mother was one after all. But Izuku had always dreamed of being a hero. Ever since he knew what a hero was. It wasn't easy to just give up on her dreams. But he couldn't explain that to her. He had failed at that too many times. All right, Mom. Izuku sighed. In the end, he couldn't refuse her authority nor refute her points. So he just had to go along with it. He'd already put up with all the bullying and powerlessness all his life anyway. What was another month? How bad could it be? The next day, take a swan dive off the roof and hope you're born with a quirk in your next life. Bakugo told him mockingly. Very bad. Turns out the answer was very bad. Let's go back a bit. You see, the teacher had talked to all of them about thinking seriously about their future. For about 2 seconds before just saying, who cares, you all want to be heroes. And then he pointed out that both he and Bakugo applied for 𝐂, which brought life back to the dead horse that was making fun of Izuku. Naturally, everyone laughed at him, but Bakugo had a different reaction. Suddenly, while Izuku was sitting in his seat wishing he could just disappear, he felt something, that strange buzzing in his head again. Incoming. Left. He barely turned his head in time to see Bakugo coming at him with his palm raised and a look that would make a grown man shrivel up in fear. It seemed like time had slowed, and Izuku guessed that was a result of his new spider speed. And so whereas he actually had about a second to react, it felt like he had 10. So he leaned back. So when Bakugo slammed his palm against his desk and blew it up, the explosion just missed him. Bakugo was shouting at him, but Izuku wasn't listening. His brain was too busy thinking about what just happened. That buzzing. The same thing happened last night. Some kind of warning system, like a spider sense. Izuku thought, do spiders normally have that? What else can it do? Does it just tell me if I'm in danger, or does it tell me if other people are in danger too? What about danger that isn't physical? Will it tell me if I'm about to say something wrong? Then suddenly, Izuku felt Bakugo grab his shirt. Hey, pay attention to me, Deku. Why didn't it go off? Izuku wondered. 𝐭 went to grab me, so why? Unless, it only alerts me if I'm actually being attacked. 𝐭 just went to grab me and didn't attack me yet. So since he didn't go to attack me, it didn't go off. 𝗧𝗫𝗅. Bakugo could see that Izuku still was not paying him full attention, and so he raised his palm, ready to attack him. And the spider sense still didn't go off. Bakugo was about to attack, but suddenly he was stopped. "Bakugo, if you are going to assault Midoriya, then please wait till after my class," his teacher warned him half-heartedly. The explosive blonde paused, and eventually backed off, letting Izuku go, glaring at the boy all the while he returned to his seat. "Kaken definitely went to hit me there. Why didn't it go off? Unless that was a bluff," Izuku theorized. "No, that's not like Kaken at all. If he wanted to attack me, he definitely would. The only thing I can think of is that it didn't warn me because Kaken didn't end up actually attacking me. But how would the spider sense know that? Unless it's a precognition ability. And Midoriya, please stop with the creepy muttering." His teacher scolded him, with a far harsher tone than he had with Bakugo. "Yes, sir. Sorry," Izuku apologized. Later, Izuku did what he normally did and packed up as quickly as he could. Or rather, he would have done that if that wouldn't have given away the fact that he now had super speed. Since Izuku hadn't really gotten used to his new powers, he knew that if he attempted to go as fast as he normally did, he would mess up and move way faster than a normal person should. So he restrained his movements and went slowly and carefully. And this had the expected result. Bakugo came in, told him not to apply to UA, threatened him, destroyed his notebook. Typical stuff. And as the blonde and his minions were leaving, Izuku thought he might actually get a break, and that would be all Bakugo did to him today. Until he said this: "Take a swan dive off the roof, and hope you're born with a quirk in your next life." Izuku's eyes bulged and he paused for a second, trying to figure out if what he heard was really what he said. When he eventually realized that yes, Bakugo really said that, his blood boiled. He looked at Bakugo with a look of pure anger. And Bakugo met his gaze with confidence, holding up his palm to remind him of his power. Izuku's fist clenched. Never in his life had he wanted to punch Bakugo so much, and maybe it's because now he could. With his new power, he now actually stood a chance in a fight with him. But he held back, his fist unclenched, and he turned away from Bakugo. "Heh," Bakugo chuckled. Weakling. The bully and his entourage left, leaving Izuku alone in the classroom. He sighed and looked out the window where Bakugo had thrown his notebook. Izuku did a scan of the classroom and then looked around the area down below the window. No one was there. No one was watching. He knew he shouldn't do this. He really shouldn't. But no one was looking, so it wouldn't hurt to use his quirk just a little bit. And so he jumped out the window from the 4th floor. After about a second of freefall, Izuku landed safely on the ground without a scratch. Izuku smiled to himself for a second. It was just a reminder that this was real and that at least for now he had a quirk. He prayed it would last. Moving on, he walked towards the pool of water that his notebook was now floating in, and much to his dismay the fish in the pond were nibbling at it. Izuku sighed and quickly picked the soaking wet notebook. My dreams aren't fish food. Now with the rush of using his powers for a second had worn off, he was back to thinking about what Bakugo had said. I can't believe he said something so stupid, Izuku shouted as he walked out the school gates. What if I really did kill myself? He'd have committed a murder basically. He wasn't actually gonna do it. He'd never even thought of doing it. And he was sure that Bakugo didn't actually mean it. But the fact that he actually said that showed that his former friend was really far gone. And it hurt to see. What happened to us, Kaken? Izuku asked aloud as he walked underneath a bridge on his way home. Did quirks really change you so much? He still remembered, very clearly, the time when they were friends, although it was now far in the past. And a very short part of his life, it was some of the best memories he had, so he held on to them tightly. How did it go from that to this? Behind you. His spider sense went off, and the buzzing was much stronger than it had ever been before, to the point where it hurt a bit. He quickly looked behind him and saw a giant hand made of sludge was coming at him. Oh god. Izuku jumped back a good 10 feet, safely dodging the sludge. A villain. Izuku's eyes widened in fear and shock as he watched the villain come closer to him. A medium-sized disguise. Perfect. The villain was literally a mass of sludge, with its only 2 human-like characteristics, being 2 eyes and a mouth. Hey, kid, let me borrow your body. And with that the villain lunged at him, extending his sludge tentacle to try and snatch up Izuku. The spider-powered teen dodged to the side, before moving to the other side to get away from another tentacle. I have to get out of sight, Izuku thought. He looked around and saw the buildings around him before getting an idea. Kicking himself off the ground with a mighty jump, he launched himself a good 20 feet. Then while in midair, he quickly kicked off his shoes and socks before turning to a nearby building and shooting out a web line. The line hit the building, and Izuku pulled himself towards it. Izuku hit the building and latched onto it with his hands and feet, sticking to it with his quirk. Hey, get back here, the villain shouted as it shouted out another sludge tendril at the teen. Izuku quickly crawled up the building, the tendril barely missing him and smashing into the building, breaking apart the concrete it smashed into. He made it to the roof and looked down at the sludge villain. Hey, come back down, the villain cried. Seems like his range extends up here, Izuku thought, breathing a sigh of relief. He was safe. He could easily take off and run to find a hero. Fine, I'll just find another disguise," the villain shouted. Izuku's eyes widened, his pupils dilating, as he realized that now with him out of reach, the sludge villain would go attack someone else. Someone who was much less equipped to escape from this horrifying monster of a villain. In that instant, he knew what he had to do. As the villain started running away in the other direction, Izuku jumped off the roof and started shooting web shots at the villain's back. But they were all absorbed into the monster's liquid body, doing nothing. Hey, the villain turned around and saw Izuku falling back towards the ground. "So you came back, stupid kid." The sludge villain launched out another tendril at Izuku, but the teen shot a web at the ground and tugged, pulling himself towards the ground at great speed, dodging the tendril. He landed on the street so hard, it cracked the ground, and yet he was unaffected. Its body was unaffected by my webs, and I don't think I can punch his liquid body away. Izuku was quickly trying to come up with ideas before the villain could get another chance to attack him. He focused on the villain's eyes and saw them swivel to look at him, and a light bulb illuminated over his head. The villain shot out another tendril at Izuku, and the boy moved a foot to the side to dodge it, before shooting out a web shot at the villain's eyes. The shot hit, and the villain's eye was covered in a thick, sticky web. "Get it off! Get it off!" The villain started flailing wildly, its slimy tendrils thrashing everything nearby, knocking over parking meters, damaging cars, breaking windows, and causing other damage to his surroundings. Seeing how well that worked, Izuku unleashed a barrage of web shots at the villain's eye and mouth, covering them in a sheet of webbing. 4000 mmHM. The villain tried to yell out curses at Izuku, but the webs around its face kept any words from coming out. "Time to finish this," Izuku shouted. He shot a web line at the villain's face, which was covered by the web sheet, and then started pulling. 7000, 5000. The villain shouted out in panic. As he felt his face literally being pulled off his body, he tried to resist, urge his body to keep hold of his eyes and mouth. But Izuku's webbing was too strong, and his strength too much, and after a few moments, eventually, they plopped free. The eyes and mouth plopped onto the floor, and the sludge body fell to the floor, seemingly motionless. After taking a few moments to take everything, Izuku realized that the fight was over. He won. I did it. I won. I beat the villain. Elation filled Izuku's body, as a huge grin broke out on his face. "I won. Did you now?" said a gruff voice from behind him. Izuku's pupils shrank in fear. As a hero nerd, he immediately recognized that voice. He turned behind him and saw the hero 𝗧𝗵𝗲 standing there with his arms crossed. "Kid, do you know what vigilantism is?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had been pursuing the sludge villain but had lost track of him when he went into the sewers. Now he finally found the bastard only to see that some kid had taken him down. Impressive and illegal. "Why yes, sir." Izuku wilted under the hero's gaze. "But I was attacked." "And could you have run away?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 asked him. What?" Izuku realized where this was going. "Could you have run away?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 repeated sternly. Well, yes." Izuku's head fell and his shoulders slumped. "I could have used my quirk to run away." "Well, then what the hell did you think you were doing fighting that guy?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 scolded him, yelling so loudly that it would put Present Mike to shame. "Unlicensed use of a quirk is illegal, and you can see why. Look at all the property damage you caused." Izuku turned around and cringed when he saw that there was a good deal of damage done to his surroundings. Messed up cars, broken parts of the streets, chunks missing in the walls, etc. "If I wanted to, I could arrest you, you know," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 shouted at him. Izuku froze on the spot, as fear filled his body. "Oh God, if I get arrested I might never be a hero quirk or not. Oh God, what did I do? What did I hey?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 grabbed Izuku's shoulders and shook him to get his attention back. "Listen, I'm gonna let you go for now, since no one got hurt. And you took him down easy enough it seems. I'd be ashamed to let someone with your potential get blocked from the hero business because of this." A wave of relief washed over Izuku and yet again a smile broke out on his face, this time accompanied by tears of joy. Lots of tears, literal rivers of tears. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay. Geez." 𝗧𝗵𝗲 pushed Izuku away, not wanting the literal rivers of tears to soak his costume. Suddenly 𝗧𝗵𝗲 stopped, as he spotted something from behind Izuku. It was the sludge villain. He was escaping down into the sewer. Little did Izuku or 𝗧𝗵𝗲 know. While the sludge villain's face was separated from its body, controlling its body became much harder, but not impossible. It could slowly ooze its body in any direction, and while Izuku and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 were distracted, he managed to push his body back towards his face, regaining full control before slithering back into the sewers. "Damn it." 𝗧𝗵𝗲 ran past Izuku. "Go back home, kid. Let the pros deal with this." And with that, he was gone, leaving Izuku alone. Honestly, he wasn't sure how to feel. On the one hand, the villain got away. On the other hand, he didn't get arrested for vigilantism. And although Izuku was glad that his chances of being a hero weren't killed at that moment, He was also deeply frustrated that his hard work in taking out the villain was for nothing. He sighed and looked at the destruction the villain had caused and winced once again. Izuku could only imagine the pain it would be to clean all this up. It was far from the worst destruction he'd seen a villain cause while fighting a hero, very far in fact. But it was also very far from the instant victory, no collateral damage All Might fights. I still have a lot to improve if I'm gonna be the #1 hero. Assuming that this quirk lasts, Izuku sighed. He had been able to defeat the villain with his quirk, but his quirk might not be permanent. What would have happened if he didn't have this quirk, he wondered? Well, the answer was obvious. He would have died. Izuku looked at his hand, clenching and unclenching it. He'd always known he was weak before, but, ironically, it was only now that it power did he truly know how powerless he was before. Kaboom! Izuku's attention snapped back to reality as an explosion went off in the distance. That was only a few miles away, Izuku thought as he quickly realized what happened. That must be the sludge villain. His first reaction was to run towards it and see what was going on. After all, he loved watching hero fights. But then he stopped when he remembered what 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐻 told him. To go home. He knew he should probably listen. He'd let Izuku off with a warning and he shouldn't take advantage of the man's kindness. After thinking about it for a minute, he decided to go. After all, he was just going to watch, get some closure, see for himself that the villain was taken care of. He was just going to watch. With that in mind, Izuku started running towards the explosions. A few minutes later, Izuku hoped he wasn't too late. He had to restrain himself again, to keep from moving at super speeds again, so it's not like he got here as fast as he could. However, judging from the continuing explosions, and a group of people gathered near the explosions, and the fact that his spider sense was going off like crazy, he guessed that the fight was still going on. From the distance over the crowd, he could only see bits of green sludge, confirming his suspicions. Get closer, go go go. The buzzing in his head was so powerful, more powerful than it had ever been before, and he knew that whatever was going on in front must have been really bad, but couldn't see much more than that through the crowd. He'd need to get closer, so he gently and slowly pushed through the crowd, trying to make sure he didn't hurt anyone with his super strength or even reveal he had it. Eventually, he made it to the front and was able to get a full view of the nightmare that was in front of him past the police tape. The entire area was littered with flames, as Backdraft and 𝗵𝗲 worked to both put out the flames and rescue the people still in the area. Destruction was everywhere, with the sludge villain at its center. Several other heroes were present, such as 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻, and Mount Lady was also nearby, but it seemed like she couldn't get anywhere close to the villain, because the area was too small for her to fit. And 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻 was just standing by the crowd, and no hero was attacking the villain directly. But the worst part was that the villain had a hostage. Kaken, Izuku thought as pure horror filled his body and mind, and his face went white with terror. Bakugo was being held by the sludge villain, stuck in its body while the villain tried to suffocate him. The explosive teen was trying his best to escape, using his explosions to try and free himself, but all that did was set the surrounding area on fire. Never in his life had Izuku seen Bakugo, the cool, powerful Bakugo, so helpless, and it absolutely terrified him. The pure fear in his eyes was so odd, so out of place. The vulnerability is so contrasting with his image of his former friend. It was like watching someone light water on fire. It was opposite to what one would expect, that it boggles the mind. Move, save him. Izuku, without thinking, moved forward, about to try and save Bakugo himself. However, he only made it past the police tape, before he was stopped by 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻, who held Izuku back with his hand. What? You again? 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻 said when he saw the person he was holding back was Izuku. I thought I told you to go home. Kaken, Izuku shouted out to his captured tormentor, before turning to 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻. Please, you have to help him. Why aren't you helping him? 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻 winced. The desperation in Izuku's tone and the use of what was obviously a nickname implied that the person being held captive was a friend of the boys. Just hang in there, kid. Let the pros handle it. Izuku remembered when 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻 had said that earlier, and then he remembered his mother's words. With that much power, you could end up hurting someone very badly if you're not careful. If you see someone in danger, just let the heroes handle it, sweetie. Unlicensed use of a quirk is illegal, and you can see why. Look at all the property damage you caused. This was different from last time. Now there were people around. A lot of people who could get hurt if he charged in recklessly like he did last time. And the surrounding buildings were already weakened by the fire if the villain did that thrashing about like he did last time when Izuku blinded him. Not to mention, with all these people here, there was no way he'd get away with the same blatant vigilantism. If he moved in, not only could people get hurt, but his dreams of getting into 𝗼𝗲 would end there and then. After all, they didn't allow criminals. Still, the pure look of fear on Bakugo's face made him want to charge in right away. Even now his body was moving forward unconsciously, only held back by 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗻's arm. After a few moments, he came to a decision, and he stopped. He had always admired heroes as a child. He practically worshipped them. He could trust them to take care of this, right? And so he waited and watched while the heroes did nothing. Move, move, save him. He's dying. Save him. His spider sense was going off like crazy. It hurt so much to ignore it, but had to, right? He waited and waited and waited for someone to do something. But no one did. Save him. Move. Seconds turned to minutes as more and more time went on, and no one made a move to stop the villain. No one moved to save Bakugo. Why? Izuku whispered, only being loud enough for 𝗧𝗵𝗲 to hear before he started yelling at the top of his lungs. Why isn't anyone doing anything? We can't. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 yelled at the kid. What do you mean you can't? That made Izuku angry. He just told him to sit there and trust the heroes, and now he's saying they can't do anything. You're heroes. Do something. His body is immune to all-out attacks. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 argued. We're waiting for backup. Attack his face. Izuku screamed at him at the top of his lungs. 𝗧𝗵𝗲's eyes widened, and he looked back at the sludge villain and realized that while most of its body and arms were made of liquid, its face was not. Never in his life had he felt like such a failure. Moving quickly, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 bent down and dug his fingers into the road before using his strength to pull out a huge chunk of the street. Hey ugly. Huh. The villain looked at 𝗧𝗵𝗲, giving the hero a good look at its face. And so 𝗧𝗵𝗲 threw the chunk of the street at the villain as hard as he could. 𝐒𝐩𝐽𝐻. The villain's face was thrown off his body, knocked away by the hunk of tar. His body fell to the floor, and Bakugo was free. Although at this point, he had already fallen conscious, so he just laid there, in a puddle of sludge. Kaken. Izuku ran forward. With the villain defeated, he had no reason to stay back, and so he ran to him. Meanwhile, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 quickly went over and picked up the sludge villain's face, not letting the same thing happen twice. Izuku went over to Bakugo's unconscious body, and much to his relief he was still breathing. They weren't too late. Bakugo was saved. The next day, at Izuku's house, Katsuki's dying, and Ko told him tearfully, what? Fortunately, Izuku was already sitting. Otherwise, his legs would have crumbled beneath him and made him fall on his ass. But the sludge. It was in his mouth too long and he got sick. And Ko sobbed, trying her best to explain this through the tears. It was in him too long. It was in him. Too long. He could have stopped this. He should have stopped this. Izuku had beaten the sludge villain already. He could have done it again in record time. But he just stood by. He let Kaken die. It had been 2 weeks since Izuku had gotten the news of Katsuki's imminent death. Katsuki only had 3 more weeks left apparently. Bakugo of course hadn't gone to school. Even if he wanted to, his body was too weak. He had been held up in his house. Izuku couldn't imagine how he was taking this. He didn't want to imagine it. Izuku hadn't gone to school either. He didn't have the motivation to leave the house, and his mother didn't have the heart to make him. Rather, she called the school to say Izuku would be on leave due to family matters, which wasn't technically wrong. The greenette had been mostly unresponsive. The first week was spent entirely in shock. He didn't say a word the entire time, barely moving, only performing basic human functions like sleeping and eating. The second week was when his emotions began to run rampant. He cried, he screamed, he used his new super strength to smash almost everything in his room. Hundreds of dollars in merchandise was lost. But Izuku couldn't bring himself to care right now. Speaking to those powers, about the only good thing that could be said about these past few weeks is that the powers stayed around, and seemed to be permanent. But even that Izuku couldn't bring himself to be happy about. How could he? His childhood friend was dying, and it was his fault. Izuku didn't know if he should see Bakugo. He didn't know if Bakugo would want to see him. Heck, he didn't know if he deserved to see him. Maybe the last he would see of Katsuki would be from that attack, with his face contorted in terror and begging for help. Help that would only come too late. Maybe the last he would see of Katsuki would be the image he would forever remember, and be forced to look at every time he closed his eyes. But to his surprise, one day Ko got a call from Mitsuki saying that Katsuki wanted to see Izuku. And so despite not being sure if he could bear to see his old friend dying because of his actions, he knew he had no right to refuse. So here he was, at the Bakugo household, standing in front of Katsuki's door. He said he wanted to see you alone. Mitsuki was right beside him, her voice lower than he'd ever heard it before. Izuku didn't have the heart to look her in the eyes. The guilt was too heavy for him to lift his head. I'll be close. And with that, Mitsuki walked away. Izuku looked at the door. Behind it was repercussions of his inaction. His heart didn't have the strength to open it, but his guilt did, and so he opened it. Inside was Katsuki, laying on his bed. There were several machines and IVs attached to him, likely keeping him alive for as long as possible. Katsuki himself was pale, his body almost limp, and for the second time in his life, Izuku had seen him weak and vulnerable. A sight he was now learning was his least favorite thing to look at. Deku. Bakugo said his name, his voice weak and hoarse. It was clear he was dying, but he didn't sound as angry as he normally was. In fact, he was calm, and it threw Izuku off completely. 𝐂𝐸𝐽. Izuku stuttered back, sounding more unsure and scared than the dead man before him. Why do you keep calling me that? Bakugo asked him, his red eyes looking at him not with rage for once, but with curiosity. Sorry. Izuku was cut off. I didn't tell you to stop, Bakugo told him, his tone being firm and strong despite the obvious weakness in his voice. It was as if even when dying, he still commanded power, still had control. I asked you, why do you keep calling me that? Well, I guess it's because I just got used to it, Izuku answered hesitantly, completely unsure of himself. Deku, we both know that's not what I'm asking. Bakugo's infamous glare returned, but it lacked the rage it once held. Why do you still think we're friends? After everything I did to you? Why? Izuku looked deep inside himself. He had to be honest. If not now, then never. So he looked past all the justifications, all the lies he told himself, and found the truth. You were the only friend I ever had. You were so powerful and strong. I wanted to be like you. Bakugo looked like he thought about that for a moment. So, even after all that shit I did to you, after every time I tried to put you in your place, to break your spirit, to get the message that we weren't friends and I wanted nothing to do with you, through your thick fucking skull, the reason it never took is because you were in denial for 10 fucking years. I guess. Izuku's shoulders slumped. There was a short pause before Bakugo continued. Deku, come here. Bakugo pointed to the spot right next to his bed. With a bit of hesitation, Izuku did as he was asked, and moved towards that spot. And when he reached it, once again he found himself getting grabbed by his shirt. We are not friends, Bakugo told him. There was no anger, no malice, no explosions, just a firmness and forcefulness that forced Deku to acknowledge the truth. Izuku looked down, the illusion broken, he now saw reality. Yeah, we aren't. Look at me, Bakugo growled. Look me in the fucking eyes when I'm talking to you. It was funny, even when Izuku was the strongest he ever was, and Bakugo was at his weakest, the blonde still held power over him, and so Izuku immediately did as he was told, and met Bakugo eye to eye. I was a fucking asshole, Bakugo told Izuku, shocking him to his core. I thought I was hot shit. I did whatever the fuck I wanted, and I didn't give a shit how anyone felt about it. I thought I was king of the fucking world, destined to be the strongest. But I was fucking wrong. I was weak, and now look at me, killed by my own fucking quirk. That one statement rocked Izuku's already shattered world. What? Izuku's voice was so quiet that had Bakugo not been right next to him he wouldn't have heard him. Think Deku, if didn't use my fucking quirk while that bastard was trying to drown me, then there wouldn't have been any fucking fires. Meaning that the goddamn heroes could have actually gone to save my ass instead of trying to save everyone in the fucking burning buildings. Bakugo told him, if I hadn't fucking flipped out, then I wouldn't be fucking dying. Oh god, Izuku thought, absolutely horrified by what he was hearing. He thinks it's his fault. For once Bakugo didn't blame Izuku for something when actually deserved it. Izuku had to set things right. He had to tell him the truth. Bakugo, it wasn't your fault. I was the one who let you die, Izuku admitted as he looked away in shame. Bakugo gave him a confused look. What the fuck do you mean? Izuku wasn't ready for this, but he owed him an explanation. He backed up, freeing himself of Bakugo's grip, and then he aimed his wrist up towards the ceiling. 𝗧𝗵𝗶. He shot out a web shot at the ceiling. Bakugo looked at the web in pure shock. For once he lost the control he seemed to have had, as he was overtaken by this out-of-nowhere surprise. That's not all. Izuku took off his shoes and socks and went towards the wall. Then, he started climbing it. Not much, he just went far enough to show that he was in fact sticking on the wall. He relaxed his hands and dropped off the wall. Then he turned his attention to the dresser on the other side of the room. Izuku zipped towards it, so fast that to Bakugo he just looked like a blur. Then he grabbed the dresser and lifted it over his head with ease, showing off his new strength. After putting the dresser back down, he looked back at Bakugo. Katsuki looked like he just saw All Might lose an arm wrestling contest, or like he just witnessed his mom fly, like he had seen something impossible. After a few moments, he spoke again. You have a quirk. I got it after that spider bite incident, Izuku explained softly. We're guessing the spider had some sort of quirk that allowed it to pass its abilities with its venom. Sorry I didn't tell you about it sooner. Mom didn't want me showing it off in case it wasn't permanent. Katsuki's shock didn't fade, as he took the time to process what he heard. The whole spider thing. Well, he would hesitate to think that it made sense, but at the same time the alternative option, that Deku was lying and that he always had a quirk, made even less sense. Firstly, there would be no reason as to why Izuku would hide his quirk. Secondly, that spider bite incident was freaky as hell, so it made sense that there was something more to that than just Izuku being poisoned. And him suddenly having spider powers after that would be too strangely coincidental. And third, he would have to assume that Izuku was lying to him the whole time and that even on his deathbed he was lying to him. The old him may have jumped to the conclusion that Izuku would lie to him even while he was dying. But after taking some time to look back on everything, it made less sense. And after all, if Deku really wanted to keep lying to him, he just wouldn't show him his powers. The thing about 𝐻𝐭 not wanting people to know also made sense. If Izuku started showing off his new quirk and then lost it, Katsuki would have given him hell. But the thing that still didn't make sense was what this had to do with Izuku saying that he let him die. Unless, of course, Izuku was there, and he just stood back and watched while Bakugo was being suffocated, when he thought he could have helped. You were there, Bakugo concluded. You thought you could have beat that thing. More than thought. I knew I could, Izuku explained. I already did. The look Bakugo gave him told him to explain. And so after taking a deep breath and clearing his throat, he did so. That villain, he attacked me first, but I thought back. I webbed up his face and then I yanked it off. Izuku recounted. I beat him. But then 𝗧𝗵𝗶 showed up, and he scolded me for vigilantism. And while he was scolding me, the villain somehow got his face back to his body and escaped. And when I found him again, he already had you, and there are all those heroes and the people. I wanted to go save you. But if I did, then everyone would have seen me commit vigilantism. I thought the heroes could handle it. 𝗧𝗵𝗶 told me I could handle it. As Izuku went on, his voice became weaker, and tears flooded out of his eyes. I let you die. I should have done something. I could have done something. Izuku fell to his knees and got into the 𝗃𝗧𝗏 position, bowing his head in a sincere apology, knowing it would never be enough to make up for his inaction. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. While Izuku sobbed, he couldn't see Bakugo's expression, but he could imagine it. He imagined that he was furious, that he was enraged, that he might even try to attack Izuku despite his condition. But when Bakugo spoke a few moments later, his voice was deadly calm. Deku, come over here, he complied, because what else could he do? Izuku got up and walked towards Bakugo's bedside. In front of you. His spider sense told him what was coming, and he ignored it. Kaboom! Bakugo used what little energy he had to hit Izuku with an explosion that knocked him on his ass. Izuku was surprised and disappointed by how little it actually hurt. Get your ass up and look at me when I'm talking to you, Deku. Bakugo shouted at him, his voice regaining its lost ferocity. Izuku immediately complied, getting back up and forcing himself to look at Bakugo's face again. He was in fact furious, but not the typical rapid beast kind of furious, but more like a righteous fury, like he had a mission and would accomplish it no matter what. Never fucking do that again. Bakugo shouted at him like he wasn't dying. Listen here, you little shit. Here is what you're gonna fucking do. You're gonna become a fucking hero. You're gonna save every fucking person you see, and you're gonna kick the ass of every bastard that gets in your way. Do you hear me, Deku? Izuku took a step back in surprise. 𝐾 you win every fight, just like All Might. You save everyone, just like All Might. Bakugo continued shouting at him with passionate fury. This is our dream, Deku, and you're gonna fucking fulfill it. Do you hear me? Yes, Kaken, I promise. Izuku understood now. This was motivation. Kaken was putting their dreams on his shoulders, putting his faith in him. Fucking swear, Deku. Swear on your life. Bakugo demanded. Swear, I swear, Izuku shouted, with tears in his eyes. I swear on my life. After that, the room became silent, with the only sounds being Izuku's sniffles and sobs. A few minutes passed until Bakugo spoke up again. Get out of here, Bakugo told him. There's nothing more we need to talk about. Izuku felt like he should say something more, but after a few moments, he figured that Bakugo was right. This conversation was done, and so for the final time, Izuku complied, leaving the room. That would be the last time he saw his old friend. A week later, Bakugo had killed himself. Once he said everything he needed to say, and settled everything he could. He saw no more point in prolonging the inevitable, and he wasn't going to let some villain be the cause of his death. His funeral was not how Izuku expected it. Not that Izuku had ever really thought of himself attending Bakugo's funeral, but if he had to envision, he thought it would have been grand, with dozens of people coming to mourn the loss of someone like him. But it wasn't. Only him, his mother, and Bakugo's parents showed up. It felt underwhelming, a reminder of just how short Bakugo's life was cut. After the funeral was done, no one left immediately. No, everyone was too concerned about how he felt. His mother was, of course, coddling him the entire time. But much to his shame, his Aunt Mitsuki and his Uncle Masaru were doing the same. He couldn't look either of them in the face, and each word of comfort they gave him felt like a knife in the chest. Eventually, the Bakugos left, having to take some time to themselves, leaving just 𝗏𝐻𝐿 and Izuku. 𝗏𝐿 watched, heartbroken as her son gazed solemnly upon the grave of his frenemy. We should go home. You go. I need to just take this in, Izuku told her. Please. 𝗏𝐿 didn't want to leave her son alone. not when she felt he needed her the most. But she knew that sometimes people just needed to be alone. "Can you find your way home from here?" 𝐻𝐭 asked him, wanting to make sure that he was at least safe to leave him here. "Yeah," Izuku answered simply. "I'll be fine, Mom, just go." 𝐻𝐭 hesitated, but eventually she left Izuku to process things. Now that Izuku was alone, he could focus on the tombstone in front of him. Rest in peace, Bakugo Katsuki. It felt unreal. Even when he heard that Bakugo was dying, deep down he had a hard time believing it. He'd seemed so powerful, so confident, untouchable, like the sun itself. And much like the sun, he would probably hurt you if looked at him for too long. So that's why he needed this. Because here, written in stone, was proof that Kaken was dead. "You're gonna become a fucking hero. I promise," Izuku whispered, tears dripping down his face. "You're gonna save every fucking person you see. I promise. And you're gonna kick the ass of every bastard that gets in your way. Do you hear me, Deku?" "Yes, Kaken, I hear you," Izuku sniffed, as he spoke to someone who could no longer hear him. "I promise, I swear, I will never stand by and let this happen again. I will save every person I see and take down everyone that gets in my way. I swear, Kaken, I will do this. For you, for us." And with that solemn vow given, Izuku turned away. And for the first time, he left Bakugo behind. It had been 2 weeks since Bakugo died, and Izuku was a man on a mission. He needed to become the best hero he could be, meaning he would need to train. However, using quirks in public was illegal. Izuku's house was too small to practice in, he didn't own a backyard, and quirk gyms were way too expensive. So he had to break the law a little bit, and so he headed into the most secluded place he could think of that also would serve as a good training ground. The woods he and Bakugo used to play in. While this place was filled with lots of painful memories, if anything, that only further motivated Izuku to push on and improve himself. Of course, since he was doing this illegally, Izuku decided to go while wearing an All Might hoodie, one that could cover up his face in case he needed to hide his identity from someone. This was good because Izuku had a lot of ideas and would be spending a lot of time in the forest. The first one was, of course, working out. Even if he now was super buff and had super strength, he wasn't 100% sure that this was his limit, or that he didn't need to work to maintain his physique. Either way, he played it on the safe side and tried to do regular workouts, the only issue being that with his new super strength, he'd need to find something extremely heavy. At first, he tried trees, but they were too light, and he couldn't find any boulders big enough. He looked up how much super heavy weights cost, but it was safe to say they were out of his price range. In the end, he had to come up with a creative solution. He would go into the woods, bind a bunch of boulders together into a giant ball of webbing, and lift that. Once that issue was solved, there was the second most important thing: accuracy practice. His webs would be an extremely useful tool for combat, mobility, and rescue. And so to make the best use of them, he needed to be able to shoot them quickly and accurately. This was simple enough. All he had to do was web some rocks to some trees so they hanged off of them and then practice shooting webs. It was after numerous practice sessions that Izuku realized that the more webs he used, the hungrier he was at the end, and that he could eventually run out of webs if he used too much or didn't eat enough to replenish them. Let's just say that 𝐻𝐭 was very upset with the fact that their food expenses would more than triple from now on. The fourth exercise was a bit tricky: web swinging. Take into account his weight and trajectory, and have a perfect sense of timing, otherwise he would either go slower than he would if he just ran, or he would fall on his ass or bump into a tree. Although one thing that helped immensely with this was his spider sense. Firstly, it would tell him if he was ever going to bump into a tree, making it rather hard for him to do so unless he messed up horribly or reacted too slowly. And it would also tell him if any point he was about to web onto was unstable and wouldn't support his weight, and would even guide him towards the best places to shoot his webs to keep from falling. All this made the process go from nightmarishly difficult to simply challenging. Next was training one of his most useful powers, the spider sense. This also was a bit problematic at first, as it would require Izuku to be attacked. Izuku's solution to this problem: run as fast as he could through a dense forest, dodging trees while playing puzzle games on a portable console. That may have sounded like nonsense, but there was a method to the madness. Now obviously, since he had no friends, he couldn't find someone to attack him for training purposes. So by running headfirst through the woods at full speed, he would be able to 1. Get adjusted to his full speed, and 2. Get used to dodging things by moving out of the way of the trees. The puzzle games were there as a distraction. Izuku figured that it would be a useful ability to train himself to focus on one thing while letting his spider sense warn him of danger and allow him to dodge it. For example, if he needed to save someone while a villain was attacking him, it would also train his ability to dodge attacks without looking at them. Now, given that Izuku was very fast, the part of the woods he was running through was very dense, and puzzle games required a lot of focus, Izuku had failed to react to his spider sense in time and would run through a tree. Thank goodness his counsel was durable. Next was web experimentation. If he was going to be relying on his webs, he needed to know more about them. Firstly, how long would the webs last? This was crucial to his future as a hero because if he tried to capture a villain or hold together a collapsing structure, only for the webs to fall apart after a few minutes, that would be disastrous. And on the other end of the spectrum, shooting out sticky webs that never went away would be extremely troublesome for the people he was trying to protect. Fortunately, Izuku found that his webs lasted for about 2 hours, more than enough time for him to end a fight or evacuate an area. Secondly, if Izuku covered someone's face or mouth with them, could they still breathe? This was a tricky one because if the answer was no, and Izuku tested this out on himself, he could die. So instead Izuku put his webs over a fan to see if the air would still come out. Good news, some did, meaning that people would be able to breathe through them so long as he didn't overdo it. Third would be figuring out what his web's weaknesses were. Brute force, ineffective. Izuku had tested stretching and punching his webs, trying to break them, and even with his strength this only resulted in him getting his hands stuck. In other words, unless he was fighting All Might, he really didn't have to worry about someone punching through his webs. Blades, mildly effective. Using a kitchen knife, Izuku had tried stabbing and slashing through the webs. This actually provided results. However, it was hard and required that he used his full strength. By the end, the knife was unusable, much to his mother's dismay. In summary, using blades would work, but they would either need to be very good blades, or the user would have to have strength similar to Izuku's. Heat, somewhat ineffective. Izuku's webs were pretty non-flammable, at least as best as Izuku could tell. He couldn't really do much to experiment with this other than trying to use a lighter to ignite them and dipping them into a fire. Ultimately, his webs held up, but due to the limited nature of his test, he couldn't be sure. At the very least, he could probably make a shield to block some flame attacks, but he was sure that someone like 𝗲𝗏 could burn through them pretty easily. Electricity, effective, with a dangerous side effect. Using lighting was about as effective as using strong fire, or at least Izuku guessed it was about that effective. But what was really important was that they were conductive, meaning that if he or someone else touched them while around electricity or a villain who could manipulate it, they could get shocked. Very important to keep in mind. Water, mostly ineffective. Webs were mostly unaffected by water, not dissolving or losing their stickiness when exposed to it, although it should be noted that the range and speed of his web shooting were limited underwater, and presumably, something like a water cutter would be able to cut through the webs. There were other things that Izuku wanted to test, but due to his limited resources and space, he couldn't. Next, Izuku researched support gear. This was actually something that Izuku had kept a keen interest in for a while now. Simply put, it was useful to understand what support gear was capable of, so you could utilize it as a hero. Izuku's current interest was in two things. Firstly, boots. One big issue with his sticking to walls ability was that it required Izuku not to be wearing any shoes or sandals or anything like that, and that could be problematic. People wore shoes for a reason. He could only imagine how many times he would cut his feet on things if he just went around barefoot. So he needed to find something that would both cover his feet and allow him to stick to walls. He had tried wall crawling with just his hands, but that he found was both slower and far more exhausting. And eventually, he wanted to try wall running. Some gloves would also be appreciated. Secondly, he wanted to experiment with his web fluid. His mother had done a checkup on him and found that the thing making his webs were two glands near his wrist that held what they called web fluid. He wondered if he could recreate this fluid, or extract it, and maybe use it in weapons. But his support gear interest took a backseat, mostly because Izuku put his focus into his training, including his new acrobatics class. Now, of all the classes Izuku could take, why acrobatics? Why not some form of martial arts? Well, the answer was simple, because Izuku saw acrobatics as being more useful in the future. With his flexibility, speed, wall crawling, webs, and spider sense, Izuku could potentially jump into the center of a war zone and not take a hit. But that would all rely on his agility and acrobatic abilities. And all this training, all this experimenting, all these preparations, was only scratching the surface of what he could and would do. Phew. Izuku took a long sip of his bottle of water as he walked back home from the forest through the city. It was late, and 𝗏𝐻 would most likely be worried if he was out for much longer. After all, it had already gotten dark. His body was hot from the intense training he had endured, and the hoodie he wore did not help matters. At this point, he wanted to get home as soon as possible so he could take it off and take a bath. Unfortunately, life didn't like to make things simple for Izuku. Right. Person in danger. Suddenly Izuku's spider sense went off, alerting him that someone was in danger nearby. He looked right and saw there was an alleyway nearby. There, his spider sense buzzed in a way that told him he was looking in the right direction. And without any hesitation, he ran over to the dark alleyway. After a few seconds, he saw what his spider sense was warning him about. A woman was being held up against the wall by a bear man. A literal bear man. "Hey, you dare refuse me?" the bear man shouted at the woman. He was obviously drunk, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going to happen next. "Please, just let me go," the woman begged, looking at the man with pure fear, her eyes begging for help. "Shut up," the bear man said. He raised his clawed hand in the air. "He's going to hit her." Izuku ran at the bear man and jumped and kicked him in the face, knocking him a few feet away from the woman. He quickly turned to the woman. "Run." The woman stood there frozen for a minute before doing what Izuku said and running out of the alley. Or at least she tried to. Gah! The woman tripped and fell before clutching her legs in pain. It was then that Izuku noticed several bleeding claw marks lifting her legs, and the bottom part of her dress had been torn in several places. Damn it, he must have been assaulting her for a while. I doubt she can get very far with those kinds of injuries. Bruh, hey, you get back here. The bear man drunkenly got back up and gave a drunken charge towards the woman. His intoxicated mind seemingly not even noticing Izuku was there despite him literally kicking him aside. With the huge, intimidating bear man coming towards him with his sharp claws out and ready to do some damage, and his spider sense blaring, Izuku panicked and punched the attacker in the gut. Hard. 𝐔𝐬𝐽. The bear man went flying back, the punch literally sending him through a nearby brick wall and knocking him out. Oh no. It was at this point that Izuku had realized what he had done. He committed vigilantism. Again. Oh no. Izuku quickly zipped his hoodie over his face, hiding his identity just in case. Crap. I can't believe I did that again. What if someone saw me? What the woman tells. Wait, the woman. He turned around, remembering the injured woman behind him. His rescue instincts kicked in. Izuku kneeled down to her and started wrapping up her wounds and webs. What is that? The woman asked with both curiosity and slight disgust. Webbing. I know it's not pleasant, but it should work well to keep the blood in and the inflections out, Izuku told her. Behind why Izuku froze for a second. Two new things just happened. Firstly, his spider sense detected something unknown, and then it just stopped. No, it didn't stop, it was turned off. That freezing was a mistake, as suddenly he was wrapped up in some kind of long scarf. What? Izuku was scared. His spider sense just got turned off, and now he was being attacked. So, he reacted. He flexed out of the scarf's hold, his immense strength breaking the bindings apart with ease. Then, without wasting another second, he charged towards the direction where the attack had originated, only for him to stop and freeze again. When he realized who was attacking him, it was Eraserhead. Now he knew why his spider sense disappeared. That knowledge was about the only comfort he gained from this revelation. Because honestly, Izuku would have rather it been a villain attacking him. Because now, a pro-hero had seen him commit vigilantism. Again, so, I don't suppose why you'd consider letting me off with a warning. He knew it was a stupid question, but it was about the only hope he had, as it seemed like everything was lost. All the work he did, the pain he went through, his promise to Kaken, all of it would become meaningless if Eraserhead wanted to take him in. No, Eraserhead said, and that was it. With one word, all of Izuku's hopes and dreams were crushed. But as typical, when one entered the stages of grief, they started with denial. Please, I just wanted to save this woman. She would have been seriously hurt if I didn't do anything. Izuku argued, his tone thick with desperation. I had to. Vigilantism, illegal quirk usage, property damage, most likely excessive use of force in self-defense. Eraserhead listed off the crimes Izuku just committed, all in his uncaring deadpan tone. And also, destruction of a pro-hero's support item. I thought I was being attacked by another villain. Izuku shouted out in defense of his action. Regardless, you broke the law. I'm taking you in. There was no room for argument here. Eraserhead showed no empathy, no sign of pity or understanding. There were no exceptions to the law to him. No. Izuku was now hyperventilating, his body spasming slightly with pure panic and fear. It can't end like this. I promised him. I promised. Eraserhead didn't move forward, because to put it simply, he was unsure of how to approach. The kid broke his capture tool. Not like he escaped it or wiggled out of it. He broke it with pure strength, something that shouldn't happen. That meant this kid was absurdly strong and possibly out of his league. Of course, normally he'd use his quirk to level the playing field, but he had been using that the entire time, and it didn't stop him from breaking his capture tool, meaning this kid had a mutation quirk, and that his quirk was completely useless here. Well, at least I can give my eyes a rest, Aizawa thought as he deactivated his quirk. His target was obviously a child, and they were very obviously panicking. And when someone panicked, they typically did something stupid, meaning he'd have to watch out for a sudden FWOOSH. Instead of that, what Izuku decided to do was run away, or rather, jump away. The green teen hopped onto the roof and started running away. Eraser had considered chasing him but figured it was futile. The kid was obviously faster and more agile than him, so chances are by the time he got on the roof, the kid would have already lost him. And even if he did catch him, his chances of actually subduing him were small at best. So, rather than attempting a pointless chase, he went to go attend to the obviously injured woman. Later, at the Midoriya household, 𝐭 was already worried about her son. Well, not just because of Katsuki's death, most right now because it was late and he had yet to return. She reassured herself that he was fine. Izuku had been coming home late for a while now. Not quite this late, but still late. And with his new quirk, he had a way to defend himself if need be. He's fine, 𝐭 muttered under her breath as she set the table. He's fine. Crash. And then Izuku burst through the door in tears, sobbing as he ran at top speed to his room. Oh dear. In Izuku's room. After quickly isolating himself in his room, Izuku proceeded to sob. Again. WHYYYY. Izuku shouted out in a combination of despair and rage. Why? Why does this keep happening? Why do I keep running into villains? Why can't I just help someone with getting arrested? 𝐔𝐬𝐽. In a fit of anger, he punched through his wall, his fist making a hole right from his bedroom into the hallway. It was over, even if he had managed to hide his face. He still had shown off his quirk, his strength, speed, and webbing. If he tried to go to UA and used his quirk to pass the practical exam, then it wouldn't take Aizawa, who was a teacher at UA, long to figure out the kid with the same quirk, body type, voice, and height as the vigilante that escaped him was the vigilante that escaped him. Maybe if it was another pro hero that saw him, he could hope that they would just forget about him, and not go through the trouble of reporting him to the police and setting up a profile for him. But Eraser had no chance. He was strict and thorough. He didn't let even the tiniest thing go completely. And there was no chance that this would be fully forgotten anytime soon. Kaken, Izuku sobbed out. You only died a couple weeks ago and I already failed. I failed. For hours and hours, Izuku just continued to sob until he ran out of tears. 𝐭 had tried to come in, but she quickly realized that right now he should be alone. And so eventually, that left Izuku with the question, what now? He couldn't give up. That simply isn't an option. He made a vow on Katsuki's grave. Bakugo's last request was that he become the best of the best. Izuku didn't know how he was going to get past this, but he would. He had to. Why? Izuku racked his brain for a solution. Why? Izuku kept shouting why, but he didn't really know what he was shouting why for. Because in the end, he didn't really regret what he did. That woman would have been either killed or greatly injured had he not stepped in. Sure, he wished he could have taken the guy down with less force and less property damage. But if the situation happened again, Izuku would jump in and rescue a person in danger all over again. After all, the last time he tried waiting for the heroes, Kaken died. Vigilantism. Izuku said out loud. He understood why it had been outlawed. Untrained vigilantes had caused tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of casualties over the years, and who knows how much money and property damage. The law should be entrusted to thoroughly trained men and women, who were given the best education on ways to not only apprehend villains but save the lives of those around them. Illegal quirk usage was a problem. Bakugo had used his quirk to try and fight a villain, and all he did was end up setting everything on fire. This is why vigilantism was typically treated pretty seriously, and 9 out of every 10 vigilantes were apprehended. Of course, there were exceptions. Vigilantes of exceptional skill, power, and popularity were sometimes never caught, with some of them even becoming pro-heroes. And that is when Izuku got a very, very dangerous idea. In a dark alleyway, a trembling man was surrounded by 4 larger, scarier-looking men. "Give us your wallet," one of the men ordered, getting closer to the soon-to-be victim. Please. Please just leave me alone," the man begged. "I said, give me your money." The man picked the man up by his shirt and raised his fist up in a threatening manner. "I don't think he understands whose turf he steps on." One of the other men smirked and then opened his jaw up wide, as his teeth transformed into sharp fangs. "Let me take a bite out of him, and then we'll see if he's still gripping onto his wallet." Someone, help, the man called out. Fortunately, his desperate cries would not go on deaf ears. 𝗧𝗵𝗶. Suddenly, a web shot hit the sharp-toothed villain in the face, covering his jaws in webbing. 3,000, 4,000. The man's shouts were muffled by the webs as he recoiled back before trying to rip the webs off his face, but this just caused his hands to get stuck. What the og? Another guy got a web kick to the face by an arriving Izuku, knocking him into a wall. Izuku had arrived, decked out in his new vigilante costume, if one could call it that. In reality, it was just a dark green hoodie, a pair of dark green sweatpants, black fingerless gloves, and a thick mask that covered his face and muffled his voice. And no shoes. Hey, he wasn't rich, nor was he a genius. It was the best he could do. Back to the battle. He let go of the web and flipped onto the ground, landing on his feet. He quickly webbed up the guy he kicked to the wall, trapping him. Then right after that, he webbed the guy with the webbed-up jaw's feet to the ground, keeping him stuck to the floor. Who the heck do you think you are? One of the thugs shouted at him as he charged at Izuku. Izuku asked, before dodging the punch the thug threw at him, before grabbing his arm, throwing him over his shoulder, and webbing him to the floor. I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You messed with the wrong gang, fool. The last remaining thug's nails turned into claws as he got ready to attack. Izuku crossed his arms, trying to look as unimpressed as he could. Yeah, I just took out all your buddies in 2 seconds, but I'm sure you'll be the one to do me in. Ragh. Angered by Izuku's casual, nonchalant attitude, the villain charged him. He swiped at Izuku, who easily dodged it without moving from the spot. Oh, almost got me. The villain swiped again, and once more Izuku just ducked under it. Keep trying. Shut up. The villain raised his claw up and was about to bring it down on Izuku, but the vigilante just grabbed his arm. The villain struggled to try and free it, but Izuku's grip was too strong to escape. 3 strikes. Izuku raised his fingers to the man's face. You're out. And with a flick to his forehead, he sent the man flying 3 feet back and onto his ass. With a few quick thwips, the man was webbed to the ground along with his allies. And that makes 4. Izuku dusted off his hands before turning to the man who almost got mugged, or at least where he used to be. The second the thugs got distracted by Izuku, he ran off. Yeah, that makes sense, Izuku thought out loud, before turning to the thugs still struggling in his webs. Anyway, you 4 behave until the heroes come, won't you? Thanks. And with that, Izuku aimed his palm at a nearby building and swung away. Once Izuku was a good distance away from the scene, he gave a sigh of relief. Ew, why is acting confident so stressful? Izuku swore his heart was racing during that entire encounter, but not because he thought he was in danger, but because he was so embarrassed by the words coming out of his mouth. You see, one of the things that sometimes got vigilantes caught was their behavior. Izuku was the same height, build, and age as Spider-Man, and if he acted the same too, then that would bring suspicion. So he needed to change how he acted as Spider-Man. He needed to craft a persona, and so he thought back to 2 people, Bakugo and All Might. And what did those 2 have in common? Confidence. They oozed it. So naturally, Izuku tried to emulate them. However, there was a problem. Izuku couldn't copy Bakugo's jerkish attitude and short temper, nor could he copy All Might's overwhelming power and bright smile. So he needed to show confidence in a different way. And after a bit of thinking, he found the absolute best way to do so. Quips. Non-stop, corny, cocky as hell quips. This worked well for so many reasons. Firstly, it was insanely out of character for him. No one that met Izuku even for a second would think that the meek, constantly stuttering, nervous Izuku would be the same guy flipping around throwing out one-liners like he was untouchable. However, it was so out of character that Izuku was both unused to it and extremely uncomfortable doing it. He had to spend weeks learning how to throw out quips while not stuttering and sounding fully confident. And even then, if someone saw his heavily blushing and flustered face, then any illusion of confidence would be broken. Although if anyone got a look at his face, he'd have a lot more issues than people not buying his act. The second reason that Izuku went with quips is that they also served as a tool he could use in battle. You see, the more annoying Izuku was, the angrier his opponent would get at him. This not only focused their attention on him, rather than any civilians that might be around, and it could make them sloppier and easier to take out. The only reason it wasn't a more common strategy is because while someone was concentrating on coming up with witty remarks, they could lose their focus on the actual battle, and they could get blindsided by an attack or miss other important details. Fortunately, Izuku had a spider sense. It was amazing how useful that power was, and Izuku could only imagine how many times it would save him in the future. Tree branch, coming at you from behind. Like right now, Izuku swung to the side and narrowly avoided a long branch surging past him. Oh, crap. Izuku knew that only meant one thing. Stop. You are committing an act of vigilantism. Behind him, Kami Woods, swinging after him with his quirk. Now, this was a problem. He could escape many heroes with just the fact that he had aerial mobility. Kamui was a pro hero with the same ability, and much more skill. If you have any respect for the law, you will get on the ground and surrender. Kamui called out. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Izuku thought in a panic. I can't outswing him yet. Okay, focus Izuku. What advantages do you have? I'm much stronger, and on the ground, I'm much faster. But if I just go on the ground, he'll have the aerial advantage to catch me. I need to get him on the ground, but how? Oh, wait. And with that, Izuku stopped swinging and fell to the ground, landing on his feet. I surrender. I hope this works. Izuku would have crossed his fingers if he didn't think it would give away his ruse. Much to Izuku's relief, Kamui came down to ground level, landing a few feet away from Izuku. However, before he got close to Izuku, he shot out his wooden arms and wrapped Izuku's upper body up in it. Good choice, Kamui told him as he got closer and closer to Izuku. He started going into a spiel about the dangers of vigilantism and how much trouble he was in, but Izuku wasn't paying attention to that. Come on, closer, closer. Izuku was nervously sweating, hoping and praying that his gambit worked. Eventually, Kamui was right next to Izuku, and that's when Izuku knew it was now or never. Snap. What? Kamui shouted out in shock, as Izuku broke free of his wooden prison. Kamui tried to jump back and unleash another attack, but he was too close. Izuku grabbed him by his chest and slammed him into a nearby building. Gah! While Kamui was recoiling in pain, Izuku webbed him to a building. People around him gasped and screamed, shocked to see what he did to a pro hero. Sorry about this. See ya, Izuku said as fast as he could, before bolting away, before going into the air with his web swinging. It was a good thing that Izuku wasn't a well-known vigilante yet. Otherwise, Kamui wouldn't have been so careless. Yes, there was a profile for Izuku, but he was a small-time vigilante right now, only known for taking out low-level crooks, so it was unlikely that most heroes would know who he is and what powers he had. Although, this incident would likely bring him unwanted attention. Of course, Izuku would want attention for his plan to work, but not right now. He knew no matter how hard he trained, it would never give him experience. He needed to start fighting villains, and he needed to do it on a manageable scale. Too many people choked on their aspirations. Izuku would not be one of them. It took Izuku a bit to get back home. After all, it's not like he could just walk in through the front door. He was a vigilante. After all, if someone saw him swing in through his window, then it would be game over. First, he had to find a place where no one was looking, take off his costume, and then he could start heading home. Once Izuku did get home, he was typically alone for a while. His mother was back to work at the hospital. She had taken a vacation to spend time with Izuku after the spider bite incident, and then took some more time after Bakugo died. But now she was back to work, giving Izuku plenty of time to go behind her back and be a vigilante. Yup, Izuku still hadn't told her. To be fair, it wasn't an easy thing to tell your mother. Hey mom, I'm gonna try and become a vigilante and hope that I become so impressive that they make me a pro hero. He had told her about his encounter with Eraserhead, and that he couldn't go to the UA Hero course anymore. He needed to, because otherwise, she would update his quirk registration, and then the heroes would find him. She had of course coddled him and gave him more reassurances, but all that did was make Izuku feel guilty. He did plan on telling her soon. I mean, after all, once he got more notoriety, it'd be impossible for her not to notice. But he'd do that later, and maybe whenever later came, he'd know what to say to her. But probably not. Once Izuku got back into his room, he immediately got to work on his desk, but not on anything vigilante related. No, this was for school. You see, Izuku still intended to go to UA, just not as part of the hero course. He now planned on joining the support course. After all, he had held some interest in support gear, and the way they interacted with quirks, and he could help out the heroes in training as well. Bonus, now would it make more sense for him to enter another school, one where Eraserhead wasn't? Well, yes, but UA was still his dream school and he wasn't about to let that go. Plus, it was unlikely that Eraserhead would manage to single him out, given that he wouldn't even be in his class and he had only encountered him once, quite some time ago. At least that's what Izuku told himself. Alright, time to get to work. Izuku cracked open a book and was about to start studying. And then at just that moment, his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and saw it was his mother. Why did he have a bad feeling about this? Naturally, he picked it up and held the phone to his ear. Hey, I'm Izuku. Would you like to explain why there is a spider-themed vigilante on the news? 𝐭𝐸𝐲 shouted into the phone. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized that his run-in with Kamui may have drawn more attention than he realized. 100, that's right. A spider-themed vigilante has appeared in Musutafu, taking down a small gang of villains before being approached by the rising star, Kamui Woods. A newswoman on a TV reported. A vigilante appeared to have surrendered, but this was apparently a ploy, luring the hero into a false sense of security before attacking him. The news then showed a video taken on a phone of Izuku breaking free of Kamui's wooden bindings, throwing him into a building, and then webbing him up before swinging away. The vigilante then escaped, and his currency whereabouts are unknown. The woman said, so far the only things known about him is his spider-themed quirk, and his vigilante moniker, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Death Arms repeated. The pro hero was currently sitting in his house, laying back on his couch with various bottles of alcohol around him, a big one in his rather large hands. So that kid became a vigilante full-time. He asked himself, before taking another swig of his bottle. It was obviously that kid from the sludge villain incident. Same build, height, and quirk. Now, one would expect 𝗃𝗏𝗄 to do his job and report Izuku for vigilantism. But he had no intention of doing that. Why would he? How could he? This was probably his fault. Og, need more beer. 𝗃𝗏𝗄 got up to look for more alcohol. Things had not been going well for him ever since the sludge villain incident. For obvious reasons. He let a kid die. He completely and utterly failed at his job, so much so that a literal child could have done it better. What's worse is that as far as the public was concerned, 𝗃𝗏𝗄 had saved Bakugo. Because that was technically true. He had saved him at the moment. And he stopped the sludge villain, but ultimately, the kid still died because of his actions, or rather his inaction. But the public didn't know that. The HPSC made sure of that. As far as the public was concerned, Bakugo Katsuki stopped existing after he went to the hospital. But not to 𝗃𝗏𝗄. 𝗃𝗏𝗄 would never forget him, no matter how much he drank. The other kid that would haunt his nightmares. The green-haired kid he hadn't learned the name of. The kid who could do his job better than him. And the kid whose look of pain and suffering as he watched his friend die would forever stick in his mind. And now that kid was a vigilante. Again, he could report him. It was his job to report him. But he'd already failed at his job once before. Why start doing it right now? And if he deserved to be a hero, then surely that kid did too, so who cares? 𝗃𝗏𝗄 found a can of beer in his fridge and quickly started chugging it down. He'd keep his mouth shut. He owed the kid that much. 100 a spider-themed vigilante. How interesting. And he managed to escape from Kamui Woods. Yes, he could have potential, but I need to test him. Let's see what villains are active in that area. He's still learning, it seems so. Not someone too dangerous, but someone who should prove a challenge. Oh yes, Vulture, he should do. I just need to pull a few strings and keep the heroes in the area distracted, while Spider-Man does what he needs to do. Izuku knew his mother would disapprove of his choice to become a vigilante. The mature thing to do would be to sit down and have a conversation with her about his decision and convince her that he was doing what he needed to do. However, Izuku was a purely irrational being, known as a teenager, so instead, he did this. Wow, Mom, someone else has spider-themed powers? That's insane. Anyway, I gotta go bye. Before Inko could say another word, Izuku hung up. He would pay for that later. But at least he had some time until Mom got home to figure out what he was gonna say. And then he heard the front door open. Izuku. He heard his mother yell. She came home early. Izuku was starting to panic even more than before. Sweating heavily, she heard her footsteps getting closer to him. Again, if he was a logical person, he would face her right now and talk to her like an adult. But as mentioned earlier, teenager. So instead he webbed up his door and quickly started changing into his Spider-Man costume. TWHOM. THWOM. THWOM. Izuku. Inko tried to open the door, only for the web to stop it. After a few more seconds, Izuku finished putting on his costume before leaping out the window and swinging away. 110 After about a half hour of web slinging, Izuku now sat on the edge of a building, resting. Oh my god, I am in so much trouble, Izuku thought. Okay, calm down, Izuku. You bought yourself some more time, maybe at the cost of getting scolded, but you have more time to think about what to say. Kaboom! Everything shook as an explosion rang out down at the street level. AHHH. Izuku immediately stood up and looked down, seeing people running away from the building that exploded, which from the looks of it, seemed to be a bank. Then from the smoke, a man flew out of the smoldering building. The man was old, looking to be about 50, older than your typical villain, and he was wearing a green flight suit and goggles. Instead of arms, he had 2 large green wings, which he was using to fly through the air. He also had a bag that appeared to be full of money, strapped to his back. Ihahaha. With no heroes in my way, no one can stop me. The Vulture, the old man shouted as he flew off. A villain. Izuku swung down to the bank and looked at it. People were pouring out of it. And his spider sense wasn't going off, meaning everyone inside should be fine. So after getting a running start, he started swinging after Vulture. It took Izuku about a minute of web slinging before he got close to Vulture. Izuku then brought his hand forward and shot out a web line that caught the villain's foot. Vulture noticed the web hitting his foot and looked down the web line to see Izuku, who was now hanging onto him. What's this, little pest? Vulture flew next to the building, jerking Izuku into the building and dragging him along the side of it. 𝗃𝗏𝗄. Izuku grunted as his body skidded along the side of the building at high speed. I need to do something. Wait, I haven't managed to pull this off, but it's worth a try. Izuku used his legs to push him off the side of the building for a moment. And as he came swinging back to it, he landed on his legs and started running. And after doing it for a few seconds, he wanted to vomit. Running sideways was just so disorienting it made his stomach turn. Izuku had to stay focused on his movement constantly, listening to his spider sense to avoid tripping over any faults in the building and keeping himself steady. Funnily enough, 𝗲𝗀𝗏 actually helped with this, as being tethered to something made it easier to fight off gravity's constant pull. And so he was doing it, running on the sides of buildings that 𝗲𝗀𝗏 threw him against. He was doing it unsteadily and awkwardly, but he was doing it. 𝗲𝗀𝗏 saw that his plan to smack Izuku in the sides of the building wasn't working, so he instead just used his wing to cut the web line. With the web line cut, Izuku lost his balance and fell off the side of the building. Quickly he shot out a web line and started web slinging. He kept chasing 𝗲𝗀𝗏, but he knew he was quickly losing track of the flying villain. If this kept up, he was going to lose him. I need something to make him stop. Wait a minute. Izuku got an idea. Hey, windbag, are you sure putting that money on your back is a good idea? Your spine might turn to dust if it hadn't already. Old man. 𝗲𝗀𝗏 slowed down for a second before turning and glaring at Izuku. What did you say to me, you little shit? The villain then brought his wing back, before throwing it forward, as 5 large feathers shot out at Izuku. Whoa, Izuku's spider sense blared. He was gonna have to dodge in midair. Not a skill he really had the chance to work on. He threw himself into the air, using his acrobatic skills to try and dodge the feathers. Izuku managed to move his body around 3 of the feathers, but 2 of them grazed him, making bloody cuts in his side and his left leg. Ghar. Izuku grit his teeth and powered through the pain. He couldn't afford to slow down after managing to get his opponent to do the same. His quirk seems to be similar to Hawk's, but he's definitely nowhere near as fast, and he doesn't seem to be able to control his feathers or bring them back. Izuku looked at the way 𝗲𝗀𝗏 was flying, meaning he gets slower until he presumably grows them back. With his target now moving a bit slower, Izuku once again shot out a web line to try and latch onto 𝗲𝗀𝗏, but the villain dodged it. Damn it. Izuku shot out another web line towards a building to continue web slinging. But 𝗲𝗀𝗏 shot another feather out and cut the web line, sending Izuku falling to the ground. Crap. Izuku kept shooting out web lines, trying to catch himself using the building, but 𝗲𝗀𝗏 had figured Izuku out, and instead of running away, he was going on the attack, shooting out his feathers at Izuku's web lines and cutting them. Without being able to web onto anything, Izuku just kept plummeting to the ground. No. Izuku could probably survive a fall from 20 stories high, but it would hurt a lot, and it would let 𝗲𝗀𝗏 get away. And then it got even worse. People under you. His spider sense went off, and Izuku looked under him to see that there were lots of people just standing there, watching them. And underneath him was a mother and a little girl, staring at him in shock, which was also most likely the reason he wasn't moving. He looked back up and saw 𝗲𝗀𝗏, waiting for him to plummet and ready to cut off any of his web lines. So maybe he shouldn't just shoot web lines. Izuku aimed at 𝗲𝗀𝗏 and shot out a barrage of web shots. 𝗲𝗀𝗏 started dodging the web shots, and Izuku realized that now was his chance. He shot out not 1, but 2 web lines at 2 parallel buildings. The web lines stretched a little bit, and Izuku came dangerously close to the ground before he catapulted back up, right at 𝗲𝗀𝗏. Izuku moved too fast for 𝗲𝗀𝗏 to react, and he grabbed the villain as his momentum carried them both further into the sky. Got you. Izuku grabbed onto the villain's collar and raised his fist to punch his lights out. He's attacking your chest. Izuku's eyes widened. He'd thought he had won. And it was that confidence that slowed his reaction and allowed 𝗲𝗀𝗏 to bring up his wing and slash Izuku's chest. 𝐒𝐩𝐻. Izuku recoiled back, falling off of 𝗲𝗀𝗏 as blood gushed from the massive gash in his chest. 𝗲𝗀𝗏 started to fly away. And after a few moments, Izuku recovered from the initial blow, shot some webbing to cover up the gash in his chest, and kept going after him. Izuku's pain tolerance was extremely impressive. But a massive bleeding gash in his chest was enough to throw off his focus a bit, and that made him move slower, and 𝗲𝗀𝗏 was once again threatening to escape him. Damn it, I'm never going to catch him like this. I need to think of something else. Izuku thought. Maybe an ambush. For an ambush to work, he'd need to know where 𝗲𝗀𝗏 was going. Okay, he's probably not going to head to his base or safe house since I'm still following him. So his priority should be to just escape me as quickly as possible. Izuku reasoned. So what routes could he be going? He paid close attention to 𝗲𝗀𝗏's flight patterns. He flew left around a building, then right around another once in quick succession, before making a hard left around another building and flying in the opposite direction. He's flying in a loop, in a serpentine pattern, I think. Right now we just turned a corner, meaning that maybe I can cut him off as he goes around another corner. Izuku planned, looking over the buildings. That one. Izuku strayed away from 𝗲𝗀𝗏, losing sight of him as he latched onto a nearby skyscraper. I have to move fast before I lose him. Izuku shot a web line to the top of the building, grabbing onto it firmly, before using it to balance himself while he ran up the building. After about 10 seconds he made it to the top and ran over to the other side. Looking down he saw that 𝗲𝗀𝗏 had just turned the corner of the building. Izuku jumped off the side of the building, down towards Vulture. Vulture saw the shadow of something above him, and as he looked up, he saw Izuku coming down on him. Wham! Izuku came down on Vulture and lightly punched him in the face, instantly knocking him unconscious. Yes, the green vigilante celebrated for a moment, before quickly remembering that he and Vulture were still falling. Izuku grabbed Vulture and shot a web line at the building, stopping them both. Phew! Izuku took a sigh of relief, taking in his victory. The police set up a perimeter around the exploded bank, with cops, detectives, and other members of law enforcement scuttering about doing their jobs, while the media was around asking questions and taking pictures. When suddenly from above, Vulture fell down next to a police car, stuck in a web cocoon, before the bag of money he stole landed on top of him. The policemen all immediately crowded around the defeated villain. Before they all heard a 𝐬𝗵𝗶, they looked up and saw Izuku swinging away. "Sorry fellas, I need to take care of this gaping wound in my chest. See ya soon." The cops had taken out their guns but soon realized that he was too far away to shoot, and instead focused on the captured villain. The media, on the other hand, took pictures of the vigilante that saved the day, while the heroes were nowhere to be seen. 140 and Co. was going to give Izuku a tongue lashing the likes the world had never seen when he got home. Never in her life had she been so angry at him before, and to be fair, he'd never given her a reason to be. He'd always been so well behaved, so nice, such a good boy. And now he was a vigilante. He hung up on her, and he webbed up his door and left. Of course, she knew why he was acting like this. Katsuki's death, being branded a vigilante, meaning he couldn't get into the hero course and had to hide his new quirk. She knew he was hurting. That's why she had arranged for him to go to therapy, unbeknownst to Izuku. But despite this, she still had to be firm with him. She couldn't let him just go around, committing vigilantism. As 𝐻𝐻 waited in her son's room for him to return, she suddenly heard the front door open. Figuring that it was Izuku, she got up and marched out of the room, making her way towards the living room with a huff. And when she finally got there, her mouth already open, ready to scold her defiant son, she saw him lying on the couch, bleeding in 3 different places with a massive gash in his chest. Hey, Mom. Izuku gave her a forced smile. Could you give me a hand? 90 and Co. focused intently as she finished up the last of her son's stitches while he laid on the couch. The news was going on in the background, telling her what exactly her son had done. Initially, she had wanted to just send him to the hospital. However, Izuku pointed out that having the exact same injuries that Spider-Man had might be suspicious, and that's only if they didn't find out about his quirk while they did all the appropriate tests. Fortunately, 𝐻𝐻 was a doctor, and with how accident-prone Izuku was, she had taken the liberty of gathering various medical supplies and other things she would need for things like this. Izuku's pain tolerance always made it easy to work on him, meaning it didn't take her too long. Done. 𝐻𝐻 put down the needle, and Izuku got up and looked down at himself. The cuts in his leg and side were stitched up, and there were bandages over his chest. Honestly, after the whole affair, he felt a lot better than he thought he should. Thanks, Mom. Izuku looked at his mother and saw that she was glaring at him, and he remembered that he was very much in trouble. Okay, guess we're talking about this now. Izuku, how could you do this? 𝐻𝐻 shouted at him as worried tears poured down her eyes. Look at you. I have never seen you this badly hurt in your life. Look, I know it looks bad, but if it makes you feel better, I caught the villain who did it, Izuku told her, hoping his success would make this seem less serious or make what he was doing look less dangerous. It didn't. No, it does not make me feel better. What would make me feel better is if you stopped this nonsense, 𝐻𝐻 shouted before her expression changed from one of worry to one of understanding. Izuku, I know it's hard, but is it really impossible for you to just not go out and try to save people? You can't be a hero anymore, Izuku. You just can't. That's not true. Izuku stood up, his voice being louder than he intended for it to be, as his emotions took hold of him. There's still a way. There is a history of exceptional vigilantes being offered hero licenses. It's rare, but so you just want to go out there and break the law, fighting criminals while dodging pro-heroes and the police. 𝐻𝐻 laid out how difficult and impossible what Izuku was proposing really was. Izuku, please. This is absurd. What if you run into All Might? What then? I already have a plan for that. All Might, Endeavor, Best Genius, all the pro-heroes' patrol routes and patrol times are well known, with them only making slight deviations from time to time, all of which can be accounted for. Izuku countered, meaning all I have to do is work around the lower mobility heroes, none of which can touch me. Then how did you run into Kamui Woods? 𝐻𝐻 asked. He's still new. I'm still learning his patrol times. Izuku defended himself. And even then, I handled him. Mom, I can do this. Izuku, you're breaking the law. 𝐻𝐻 shouted. I don't have another choice. Izuku told her. It's the only way I can be a hero. You don't have to be a hero, Izuku. 𝐻𝐻 yelled. Yes, I do. Izuku turned to his mother, aggressively shouting at her with tears in his life. and Ko leaned back into the couch, recoiling in shock after hearing Izuku yell at her. Izuku never yelled at her, and almost instantly she could see the regret on her son's face once he realized what he'd done. Mom, I. Izuku went quiet and sat back down on the couch. After that, there was silence for a moment before Izuku found the words he was looking for. I made a promise. To Kaken. Izuku looked down at his feet, tears dripping down his face. He made me promise to be the best hero that there ever was, to take down every villain and save everyone. It was his last request. He trusted me to carry on his dreams. Our dreams. It's not just about me anymore. It's not my choice. If I just give up, then I won't just have failed myself. I'll have failed Kaken. And I can't do that again. And Ko looked at her son, at the resignation baked into his expression. There was no doubt there. No room to change his mind. Then why did you save that woman? Ko asked him. You could have just waited for a hero. Izuku interrupted her, his tone bitter. Like I did with Kaken. Ko's mouth shut as she realized she just walked right into that. My spider sense was ringing. It was telling me she was in danger. Izuku explained. If a hero was going to save her, then it wouldn't have gone off. That woman would have gotten very hurt, or she would have died. Do you think I should have just let her die too, Mom? Aye. Ko was left gaping like a fish as Izuku leveled an impossible question at her. Not impossible because it was hard to figure out. It was impossible because there was only one answer, and she hated it. Izuku gave his mother a sad look. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't stop. It's not a choice. It's not up to you or me. I'm not trying to become a hero just because I want to anymore. It's my responsibility. I owe this to Kaken, and I can't let you stop me. You can yell at me, ground me, call the cops. I'll find a way to keep going. I'm sorry. When did Ko lose control of this, she wondered? Or did she ever even have it in the first place? Izuku made it clear she couldn't stop him from doing this, and so she was left with no choice but to support him. Izuku. Ko took her son's hand and returned his sad look. I would never call the police on you. I don't like this, but if you really have to do this, then I'll be here for you. So please, if you're going to continue, let me heal you anytime you get hurt. Izuku looked surprised, as if he expected to get yelled at and kicked out, and for his own mother to turn her back on him. And that is when they both broke. The two embraced, letting out all the tears they had, even if they didn't like how it happened. For the first time in a while, mother and son were on the same page. And while Spider-Man was taking down this C-class villain, you may be wondering where exactly were the heroes. The news was still going on in the background, and the news lady was talking. Well, according to local heroes, they were dealing with another phantom villain attack, or PVAS. There have been multiple of these throughout the past few months, incidents where heroes can hear and even see villain attacks and other crimes happening, only for them to vanish suddenly, without a trace. While some people have attributed these incidents to a villain, others are claiming these are excuses heroes give to excuse slacking off on their jobs. Whether this is just a scam within the hero society or some form of illusion is yet to be seen. After the emotional exhaustion of dodging a pro hero, fighting a villain, and having a serious conversation with his mom, Izuku was happy to just collapse on his bed. However, just as Izuku was pulling the covers over himself, the world decided that it had some more crap to throw at him. Ugh. Izuku opened his eyes. Just as he was falling asleep, a bright light filled the room. What the? When Izuku fully woke up, he saw that there was an orb of green light right next to his open window. What is that? Izuku's spider sense wasn't going off, so he wasn't going to panic. He was just confused. Then, the light moved back and forth, before moving away, as if saying, "Follow me." Izuku contemplated whether or not to follow the light. On one hand, this could be a trap. On the other hand, he had a spider sense, and if it was a trap, that meant whoever was behind this knew who he was, so he was screwed either way. But if they knew who he was, and he ignored the light, whoever it was might attack him in his house, with his mother around. With that thought, Izuku decided to follow, after putting on a hoodie and some pants. He couldn't wear his vigilante costume, mostly because it was covered in his blood and torn, but also because people couldn't see Spider-Man coming out of the Midoriya household window. The light had waited patiently for him outside the window, down on the bottom floor of the apartment complex. Izuku stood on the edge of the window, looking all around to see if anyone was looking, before jumping out. After he landed, the light then started moving away from him, urging him to follow, which he did. As Izuku followed the light, he quickly recognized the path it was leading him on. It was leading him towards the forest where he trained. He wasn't sure what to think of that. He honestly wasn't sure what to think of any of this in general. It was so weird and random. It just left him confused. 120 Making his way through the trees, he continued following the light until he reached a clearing near a cave that was carved into a tall cliff. The light stopped for a moment in the center of the cliffside and waited for Izuku to approach. This better not be an ambush, Izuku thought as he walked over to the light. And then, just as he was about to reach it, the light disappeared. Izuku waited for a moment to see if his spider sense went off, but it never did. Instead, he heard some rustling in the bushes around him. He looked towards the sound, and soon he saw someone emerging from the bushes. It was a girl, around 12 or 13 years old from the looks of it, with messy pink hair and green eyes that had bags around them, wearing a dirty uniform with a small lab coat on top that was even dirtier. The girl immediately noticed Izuku and leveled a nasty glare right at him. "You, huh?" Izuku was taken aback by the aggressive tone she used. "Were you the one that led me here with that weird green light?" She asked him aggressively, her tone showing just how annoyed she was at having been led here. "And no, I got led here by a green light too," Izuku quickly explained. The girl gave him a look indicating that she may not have believed him, but just as she was about to say something, kaboom! Above you, rocks falling. Suddenly the top of the cliff they were standing under exploded, sending a lot of huge rocks tumbling down towards them. Izuku had seconds to react. He grabbed the girl and shot a web line out towards a nearby tree, using it to swing himself and the girl away from the danger zone. They landed on one of the tree branches, and the two watched as the rocks came tumbling down, hitting the ground with a loud thud. Izuku gave a sigh of relief, but he only took a moment to celebrate, before looking back up at the top of the cliff. He jumped down from the tree and set the girl down, who had just been staring at him in shock the entire time. "Stay right here." At this point she had probably already realized who he was, so he wasn't going to worry about that right now. Right now he was worried about whoever set off that explosive. He jumped onto the damaged cliffside and started climbing up the side of it. When he reached the top, he looked around, but all he saw was a bunch of blown apart rocks. No sign of anyone or anything. "Damn it," Izuku gave a frustrated sigh. "Hey, come back down here." Izuku looked down and saw the girl standing on the rocks, calling out to him. "Okay, she knows who I am, but I just saved her life. Maybe I can get out of this." Izuku tried to reassure himself, despite the growing pit in his stomach. He jumped down, landing in front of the girl. "You're that vigilante, Spider-Man," the girl pointed out. "Yeah," Izuku confirmed. There was really no point in denying it after she saw the webs. "Listen, I'm fantastic." The girl threw her arms up as if she was celebrating something, and her manic grin sent shivers down his spine for some reason. Izuku was surprised by this reaction. It seemed pretty out of nowhere. The girl took out a notepad and pen out of her coat and started writing something down. "Meet me here in a week at 11 a.m. She then ripped the paper off the notepad and handed it to Izuku. "If you don't show up, I'll tell everyone who you are." Izuku quickly took the paper, not wanting to see if she would follow up on her threat. Wait. Anyway, see you there. We should get going right now before the heroes arrive." And with that, the girl turned and ran off. Izuku was about to give chase when he heard some footsteps in the distance. Crap, the heroes. Not wanting the heroes to see him here, Izuku sprinted off home in a separate direction from the girl. As he ran, he took out the note and looked at it. It read Dagaba Beach, Factory, 90. A week later, Izuku did as he was told and made his way to Dagaba, a garbage-covered beach that seemed more like a dump than a place to hang out. Where he was headed in particular was the old Dagaba mattress factory, a place that had been shut down for quite some time. Izuku approached the doors of the rundown factory. It was rather small for a factory, still a pretty big building, bigger than your average house. It was what one would expect from an abandoned building near a garbage dump of a beach. Windows were broken, the walls were dirty, and any metal on the building had long since been rusted. Izuku opened the rusted door, which creaked as they moved, and entered the factory. After going down a small hallway, he was now at the factory floor. Much to his surprise, it looked like the entire floor had been transformed into some kind of secret workshop. Most of the machines were gone, and instead were a bunch of benches and tables. All of them had what looked like support gear and unfinished support gear on them. There were tools scattered about the entire place. And the strangest thing of all is that there were notes and blueprints hung up all over the walls. And not just a few, what looked like hundreds of them all pinned across the walls. And sitting at the farthest workbench, on a small wooden chair, was the girl. She noticed him entering and gave that same mischievous smile, putting down whatever she was just working on, and picking up a large suitcase that she had next to her. "You're here, and perfectly on time. Punctual, I like it." The two walked over to each other, meeting in the center of the factory. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Izuku Midoriya." Izuku hesitantly introduced himself. Can we slow down for a second? This is all really sudden and out of nowhere. Why are you blackmailing me? Why am I here? What do you want?" Izuku looked annoyed at this and sighed. Fine. Come with me to my office and I'll explain." Izuku gave her a confused look. Office 110. Turns out she meant the former manager's office, which she had converted into a place for her to hang out. There was a mini fridge, a small TV, a computer, a desk, and a big padded computer chair. Izuku opened up the mini fridge and looked at Izuku. Water? Sure. Izuku was a bit thirsty. Deku nodded and took out 2 bottles of water, throwing one at Izuku, who caught it immediately. She then sat in her chair and took a long sip from her bottle. Izuku sat down on a nearby stool and did the same. After drinking from their bottles, they put them down, placing them on the desk so they could get to business. So, as I said, my name is Niku Hatsum of the Hatsum family. Niku reintroduced herself. My family is obsessed with producing and making support gear. And when I say obsessed, I mean obsessed. It's like all they think about. Okay, Izuku still didn't see where he played into this. My dad is obsessed with it, my mom is obsessed with it, and my sister, oh my sister, it's practically taken over her life. Niku scowled as she complained passionately about her family. She's barely even human anymore. That's how bad it is. She barely sleeps. She barely takes breaks. She rarely talks to me or anyone else anymore. And she rarely takes a bath. It's ridiculous. This dump of a beach smells better than her. She is absolutely disgusting. Okay. Izuku was still very confused. And she always thinks she's top dog, just because she gets the best grades, wins all the gear-making competitions. Niku continued to complain. And now she is joining the US support course. And I just know that if she gets in, it'll inflate her ego even more. Okay. Izuku was just repeating that word to try and urge her to get to the point. So, I made a plan that'll kill her ego in its tracks. And that is where you come in. Niku pointed at him with a cocky smirk, before picking up the suitcase, putting it on the desk, and sliding it towards Izuku. Check it out. Given what she said earlier and the fact that she made this place into a workshop, this is probably some kind of support gear. By why? Izuku was still confused but just decided to go along with it. He opened the case, and inside was a costume. The costume was separated into 5 parts. The mostly green mask, with black lines running along it in a web pattern, as well as 2 big white eyes. Next was the main piece, which went over most of his body and a little down his arms and legs. It was also mostly green with the web pattern like the mask. But there are also some bigger black lines running along the costume, notably down his arms and around his sides. And the most notable part of it was the giant white spider logo right on the chest. Then there were the gloves that went all the way up to his elbows. They were mostly white with a blue line around the edge of them, except for his hands, which went back to the green color with a black web theme. Moving on to the boots, they were big black metallic boots that went all the way up to his knees. Lastly was a black utility belt with some pouches and a red spider logo on the buckle. Izuku's eyes were as wide as dinner plates. This looked like a hero costume, a professionally made hero costume. Niku's smirk grew as she saw Izuku's astounded expression. Impressive, huh? And it's as functional as it is fashionable. Try on the boots and gloves. Izuku nodded and did as instructed, taking off his shoes and rolling back his sleeves before putting on the boots and gloves. They're really fitting. Wait, how did you get my size? Don't worry about it. Niku waved it off. Try climbing up the walls. Go ahead. All right. Izuku stood up and walked towards one of the walls. Then, he brought his hand to the wall, testing to see what would happen. He tried to stick to the wall and it worked. He could stick to it even with the gloves on. Since that worked, Izuku decided to start wall crawling. He brought his other hand to the wall, and it stuck. Then he brought his foot up onto the wall ... and it stuck. Izuku got onto the wall, and stuck to it without any issue. Perfect, it works just as I thought it would. Niku did a small fist pump. The tips of the gloves are super thin, so you'll still be able to stick to things even with them on. The boots were a bit tricky. I couldn't make them thin, otherwise they wouldn't protect your feet. So I had to find a way for the boots themselves to stick on the walls, which I did. The boots will attach to almost any surface without issue, depending on how you flex your foot. All you have to do is use your quirk to stick your foot to the inside of the boot, and you'll never have to worry about them falling off or losing them. That's amazing. Izuku looked at the gear with a big grin on his face before he remembered why he was here. Or rather, he remembered that he was trying to figure out why he was here. This is all great, but why are you doing this for me? Simple. Since I'm not old enough to get into you or get into the support gear industry, I have to find some other way to upstage my sister. So I came up with a plan. I will become the Tinkerer, the person responsible for making support gear for vigilantes. You are going to tell the world about my existence and show off my creations. Eventually, my sister will become overwhelmed with jealousy and fall into despair. And when she does, I will reveal to her that I am the Tinkerer, and she finally acknowledges me as her superior and beg to learn under me. While Niku was laughing maniacally, Izuku was thinking over what he just heard. It was a very stupid plan, one that would be completely unnecessary if she just waited patiently, and it was also extremely petty. But it didn't seem like it was actually going to hurt anyone. In fact, it was actually benefiting him. And she was holding his secret identity hostage anyway, so not like he had much of a choice. Okay, I guess I'm in. Not like I had much of a choice. Izuku for the most part was pretty happy about this. He got an amazing costume. Was he happy about how he got it? Not so much, but ultimately this seemed like a good thing. No, you don't. But trust me, that's a good thing. You'd be missing out, Miku said cockily, because this is only just scratching the surface of what I'm capable of. Support gear, training gear, anything you'd need a tech genius for, I can provide. The better you look, the better my gear looks. Izuku thought about that. He could think of a lot of things that Niku may be useful for. Do you think you could teach me about making support gear? Izuku asked her. Niku wasn't expecting that. After looking shocked for about 3 seconds, she shrugged. Sure, why not? Boom. 𝐻𝐻. People ran in all directions as the doors to a bank exploded open, the doors flying off their hinges and into the streets. Out of the bank came a man in a yellow jacket, with brown pants and shoes, with 2 large metal gauntlets running alongside his arms. Everyone get out of the way, the man shouted, raising his arm into the air and shooting off a green shockwave, causing everyone still around to flee in terror. The man now walked through the empty streets, ready to make his escape, until suddenly he felt the ground shake. Shocker, you are under arrest. Mount Lady ran through the streets, being careful to avoid what few people were left around, as well as the cars that were now abandoned. Before Mount Lady could even get close, Shocker raised his arm and exploited one of her biggest weaknesses, the fact that missing her is impossible. He shot her in the face with a powerful shockwave, causing her to fall back. Mount Lady was unready to take such a strong attack. And as she fell back, she shrunk herself as to mitigate property damage, so when she hit the ground she was back to her normal size. Hell yeah, with these shock-absorbing bracers, I don't have to worry about hurting my arms when I use my quirk. Shocker gloated, as he aimed again for Mount Lady and shot out another huge blast. The blast was too big to dodge, and Mount Lady was actually getting nervous. Fortunately, just as the blast was approaching her, Death Arms came in and jumped in front of her, putting his massive arms out in front of him to take the brunt of the blast. The blast hit him and sent him flying back, knocking Mount Lady back with him through an empty car, tearing it in two. Gasps rang out around the crowd that had formed a good distance away, as people watched their heroes being put on the ropes. You can't touch me. Shocker aimed both his arms at the 2 heroes who were both recovering from the last blast. Say goodbye. Goodbye, but I just got here. Shocker looked up and saw that Izuku was web-slinging over the crowd in his new costume, and was making his way towards Shocker fast. Spider-Man, get back. Shocker shot out a blast at Izuku, but Izuku shot a web line to the ground and pulled himself down to dodge the blast. Once Izuku hit the ground, he ran up to Shocker as fast as he could. Before Shocker could even react, Izuku had almost closed the wide distance between them, and as he panicked and tried to shoot another blast, Izuku made it to him and kicked his arms upward, causing the blast to go harmlessly into the sky. Wham! And with one punch, Izuku knocked the villain out cold, laying him out on the floor. Well, guess Shocker got socked, Izuku quipped, cringing internally. The crowd didn't seem to notice and was too busy being shocked at how quickly and easily Izuku took out a villain that had put 2 pro heroes in distress. Man, tough crowd, Izuku said in response to the silence. Well, better get going. See ya. And with that, Izuku got a running start, before web-slinging away. Oh no, he's getting away, Mount Lady said sarcastically, as she laid on the floor. Someone stop him. Normally she would try to go after vigilantes, but considering he just saved her life, she would give him a pass this time. Also, she just really didn't feel like getting up at the moment, as Izuku swung through the air, taking a moment to enjoy the thrill of swinging through the city. It had been a week since Izuku had gotten his new costume, and he loved it. Not only did it look cool and protect his feet, but it was also made of breathable material, meaning that, unlike his old costume, he wasn't sweating to death inside it, and it was a bit more aerodynamic. This, combined with his improved web-slinging proficiency, made web-slinging as enjoyable as it should be. Ring ring, ring ring. Another new feature of his costume was the fact that his mask was connected to his phone, meaning he could use it to make or take calls without having to use his hands. The eyes in his mask had a small HUD in them, letting him see who was calling. In this case, it was Niku. Yes, Izuku said to accept the call. Midoriya, I finally finished the new training course you wanted, Niku told him. Get your ass back to the factory. Pronto. On it, Izuku said before she hung up. I can't believe she finished it that quickly. She really is a prodigy. Maybe her quirk helps in some way. I can ask her later. Need to get back to the factory. And with that, Izuku set off to his new destination. 120 Izuku burst through the doors of the factory and made his way to the workshop. I'm here. Yeah, I heard you come in. Did you break the doors when you came in? God, Niku complained with a slight scowl on her face. Sorry, Izuku gave a bunch of apologetic bows in quick succession, before rapidly looking around the factory. Where is it? Niku rolled her eyes. How you get so excited over such a trivial thing is beyond me. Follow me. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 led Izuku through the factory to one of its many abandoned rooms. It was completely dark due to the lack of windows, but when Niku turned on the lights, Izuku's face broke out into a huge grin. Although if one looked at the room initially, they may not see the hype. In reality, it was just a brick room with a bunch of very intense-looking tennis ball machines scattered around in a circle, all pointing towards the center of the room. And in the corner of the room was a tall cardboard box with the word civilians written on it. Here it is. Niku threw a remote at him, which Izuku caught without looking. I'll be working on something that requires a bit more thought. Try not to disturb me. And with that, she left Izuku to his training. Izuku stood in the center of the room and took out the remote. On it, there was a dial that went from 1 to 10. Alright, let's see how this works. Izuku turned the dial up to a 4. He heard the machine's power on. Thump. The machine in front of Izuku shot out a tennis ball. Izuku quickly placed the remote in his pocket and moved his head to the side to dodge the tennis ball. Thump, thump. 2 more tennis balls shot out from 2 cannons on Izuku's sides, and he jumped up to dodge the balls. The exercise was a simple one. Made to help him dodge, these machines would shoot out tennis balls at extremely high speeds, and they wouldn't just come out randomly. They were all linked to a computer that was given an eye that would randomly generate attacks and follow up attacks. The balls would also bounce off the walls, meaning Izuku would still have to dodge them. And in the box was a dummy, meant to help Izuku replicate the feeling of protecting someone while dodging. Izuku continued dodging the balls, his speed, spider sense, and acrobatics making it rather easy. After a few minutes, Izuku took out the remote and turned the machine off. Alright, pretty simple, kind of easy. Let's try it at the max. Izuku shrugged. What's the worst that could happen? And so Izuku dialed it up to 10. Thump, 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 thump. Immediately all the machines shot out the tennis balls at almost bullet-like speeds, which Izuku could only barely react to. He ducked down to dodge all the balls, but as quickly they started bouncing off the walls in random directions, and 3 of them rebound towards Izuku from 3 separate directions. Izuku panicked and moved to the side, dodging 2 of the balls, but another one hit him in the chest. Damn it. Thump, 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 thump. More shots fired as Izuku was still dodging 2 more balls that were bouncing back. And once again he failed to dodge all of them and got hit in the face. Thump, 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 thump. Some of the machines started rapid firing. And as the machines fired faster and as the balls bounced off the walls, he kept getting hit again and again. Fortunately, while the balls moving at this speed would really hurt a normal person, for Izuku it was just a bit annoying. Okay, that's enough. Izuku took out the remote and turned the machines off. After that, Izuku sat down on the ground and took a quick breather. Well, looks like I still have some training to do. 150. Izuku sat on the ledge of a building, looking for crime. However, today seemed pretty peaceful. Fortunately, Niku called to make things a bit more hectic. Hey, Izuku, there is another C-class villain and thugs holding people hostage at Bioin Hospital. Think you're up to it? She asked. That actually gave Izuku pause. I'm not sure. This isn't like a normal situation where I can just punch the villain and get out of there. If I'm not careful, people could very easily die. Right, but they did say if the heroes don't come with the ransom money in an hour, they would start executing hostages. Niku explained. By the way, that was 40 minutes ago. What? Izuku shouted. He was so shocked he nearly fell off the roof. Where are the heroes? What are the police doing? Well, it seems a few heroes have gathered and some are scouting out the building, but none of them are suited for stealth. And I don't see any ransom money nearby. Niku explained, maybe a bit too casually. Things aren't looking so great. We have about 20 minutes till they blow someone's head off. Izuku was stunned into silence. His blood pressure shot up as he stressed over this decision. Okay, let's think about this. On the one hand, I could really mess this up and get someone killed. And on the other hand, things are looking like someone is about to die anyway. But they wouldn't just sit by and let someone die, would they? It only took a brief flashback of his dead friend suffocating to death while the heroes just watched to remind him that, yes, they would. I'm on my way, Izuku told her. He was intensely nervous. His hands were even trembling slightly. He had to do this perfectly. Think you can get me any help? I'll send a drone to scout the building, and I'll give you access to the police radios. Niku told him. Don't screw this up. I can't, Izuku responded. 110. Izuku was perched on the building opposite to the hospital and looked at the scene down below. He'd never swung as fast as he just did, but it was worth it as he arrived there in just 5 minutes. As usual, the police had set up a perimeter around the hospital, which the media was just swarming outside of, asking questions to everyone they could reach. Some pros had also arrived, but as Niku had told him, none of them were suited for stealth, so they couldn't go in without getting the hostages killed. Patching you into the police radio now, Niku told him. Good luck. Suddenly Izuku heard static before he heard the sounds of police talking. Villain is identified as Molten Man. C-Class. Fire Quirk. About 10 other unidentified villains are working under him. All of them appear to be armed. Molten Man is located in one of the break rooms with 5 men. 2 others appear to be holding some of the staff hostage, while 3 more are holding bedridden patients hostage. Okay, so how do I get inside? Izuku thought, looking at the buildings. My abilities include punching, kicking, webbing, and wall crawling, or maybe duct crawling. 80 After locating the air ducts, Izuku crawled inside and started moving around the building. Duct crawling was pretty easy given his wall crawling powers, but he had to make absolutely certain to stay quiet. He only had about 10 minutes left before they killed a hostage, so he would prioritize saving them over anything else. Of course, he only barely knew where he was going, and he didn't know the locations of the hostages anyway. Fortunately, it was a small hospital, so that made things easier. Okay, bedridden patients are kept on the 3rd and 4th floors. My guess is that they're on the 4th floor to give them as much distance from the heroes as possible. Izuku mused as he started crawling up the vents. After a bit more crawling through the hospital, he eventually found the rooms where the patients were located. No one in this one, Izuku thought as he looked into one of the rooms through the vents, before moving on to the next one. No one in this one, no one in this one, no one in this one. And there, finally, he had found where one of the goons was. He was sitting down in one of the chairs, with his gun standing on its butt next to him, while the patient was sound asleep in their bed. Okay, good, he's not pointing the gun at the person. I need to burst in quickly, web up his gun and his mouth, and then web him up quickly before he can make any noise. Izuku took a deep breath. His heart felt like it was about to pound out of his chest, and he was definitely gonna have to wash the costume after this with how much he was sweating into it. But he had to do it. He didn't have much time left. He moved as fast as he could, bursting out of the ceiling vent and shooting 2 web shots out, one of them webbing the gun to the wall, and the other one webbing up his entire face. 4,000. The goon couldn't do anything but give off muffled cries before Izuku webbed him to the wall, before lightly punching him in the face to knock him out. Phew, Izuku felt a bit of tension relief, but he knew this was just the beginning. Alright, now for the rest of them. 100 Turns out the rest of the goons were located in the rooms just next to that one and had been taken down just as quickly. Now with those 3 out of the way, he had to find the other 2 holding the staff hostage. Okay, 5 minutes left. Not time to waste. Where can I find a big room that's also secluded enough so they have time to respond if the heroes try to brute force this? Izuku thought. The operating floor. Those are on the 2nd floor. I better be right about this. It took Izuku a bit more time to find the room this time around. As he crawled down to the 2nd floor, he passed several operating rooms before he found the one where the people were being held. A bunch of doctors and nurses were sitting against a wall, while 2 goons pointed guns at them. Crap, they're already pointing guns at them, Izuku thought. I'd need to take them both down at once. As Izuku was preparing to attack, one of the goons' communicators turned on. It's been an hour and still no money, said an aggressive voice from the communicator. Kill one of them. Right, boss, said one of the goons, aiming his gun at one of the nurses' heads. Please, please no, the nurse begged, her voice thick with fear and dread. Sorry, blame the heroes, the goon said as he got ready to fire. Then suddenly, as the man pulled the trigger, Izuku burst out of the vent and shot 2 web lines at the guns, pulling them upwards. BLAM, 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 BLAM. The bullets hit the ceiling before Izuku pulled the guns out of their hands. What? Spider-Man, yelled one of the goons. They both just stood there in shock for a few seconds, allowing Izuku to shoot another web line at one of the villain's chest, and then slam him into the other villain. Gah! The 2 villains hit the wall, and Izuku webbed them to it. Izuku quickly turned to the hostages. Are all of you okay? Why yes, said one of the male doctors. Most of the staff evacuated B, but they managed to get us and they put us in here. Where are the heroes? Probably still outside. Izuku cringed as he saw the look of betrayal on all of their faces. Why didn't they come? I almost died, one of the nurses complained. I don't know. Izuku backed away. Look, I just rescued all the hostages, and I need to take out the remaining villains before they try to find new ones. I'm going to web up the door to keep anyone from getting in. It'll dissolve in 2 hours, and by that time this should all be over. Do you think you can hang tight for 2 hours? What about them? One of the female doctors pointed at the 2 villains that were struggling inside the webs. Right. Izuku ran over to them and quickly gave them both light punches to the face, knocking them both out. Okay, you guys good. Some of them nodded while the others were too paralyzed with shock still. With that in mind, Izuku ran out of the room and webbed the door shut. Alright, now to take down the last of them, Izuku said to himself. He quickly ran down a hallway, but when he was about to turn the corner, he was met with 5 more goons and a man in a suit, who he assumed was Molten Man walking behind him. Spider-Man, I heard my men say your name on the radio before it cut out. Figures you took them out. Molten Man scowled. Men, fill this freak with lead. The men got ready to fire, but Izuku moved first, shooting out 5 web shots at the men's guns. However, since Izuku was rushing and was a good distance away, he narrowly missed 2 of his shots and only took 3 of the guns. The 2 remaining gunmen opened fire, and Izuku jumped onto the ceiling to avoid the gunfire, before shooting 2 more webs to take out their guns. Well, looks like I turned all your gunmen into fist men, Izuku quipped as he dropped from the ceiling. No, actually that sounds dirty. The 5 men charged at Izuku, but none of them got more than 2 feet before Izuku dashed through them, taking them all out. 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗿, Molten Man activated his quirk, and his body burst into flames. Alright, Spider, try punching me and you'll get more than a sunburn. Molten Man then shot out a huge ball of fire that took up half the hallway. Izuku webbed up all the unconscious villains on that side of the hallway and pulled them away from the attack while dodging it himself. You know, for a guy with a fire quirk, you sure are cold-hearted. Guess it's time I put you out. The vigilante then crossed his arms and shot out 2 web lines at the walls next to Molten Man. Then he gave them both a hard tug, causing those parts of the walls to break free and smash Molten Man between them. Gah! Molten Man shouted as he was smushed between bricks. Now let's try this. Izuku shot a web line at one of his guns and started swinging it around, swinging it faster and faster before he smashed the butt of the rifle into Molten Man's head, knocking him out. Izuku dusted off his hands. Alright, now that that's done, how do I tell the heroes? 90. Eraserhead arrived at the panic scene, moving past the police tape and going up to one of the policemen. What's going on here? Aizawa asked him. Villains have taken control of the hospital, and they have hostages. They're demanding money, and saying they'll shoot a hostage every hour until they get it. The man cringed, and that was over an hour ago. So they've probably already shot someone. Aizawa's scowl hardened, and he glared at the officer. Why hasn't anyone tried a rescue yet? And none of the heroes can do stealth very well. The officer wilted under Aizawa's intense glare. You're the only one. Aizawa looked around at the heroes that were just standing around. What the cop said was true. All the heroes that gathered either specialized in punching things or rescuing people in the aftermath of big villain fights. If any of them tried going in, they'd likely just get someone killed. Looks like it was all up to him. He turned back to the cop. Okay, so Crash. Everyone suddenly stopped what they were doing and looked back up at the hospital. From the 2nd-story window, the unconscious Molten Man was thrown out and strung up on a web. Attached to his chest was a sign that said, "Hey guys, eat your bad guys for ya. Might want to move faster next time they almost shot someone. Love, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." Aizawa sighed, partially from exasperation and partially from relief. Looks like someone who could do stealth had shown up. In the streets of Musafafu, Wash was currently battling for his life against a B-class villain. The villain in question was full green, with reptile-like skin, claw-like hands, fangs, silted yellow eyes, and a big tail. That's right, it was Scorpion. I'll kill you, you fake hero. I'll kill you in the name of Stain. Scorpion shouted out, as he kept trying to stab Wash with his tail. 𝐴𝐻𝐻, Wash shooting out bubbles at Scorpion, but the villain just popped them all rapidly with his sharp tail. Die. Scorpion shot out venom from his tail, right at Wash. In response, Wash shot out more bubbles that encapsulated the venom, stopping it in its tracks. Gah, you're so damn annoying. All you do is appeal to kids and star in commercials. Just die already. Scorpion lunged at Wash but was suddenly stomped into the ground by Izuku, who just swung in. 𝐻𝐺H. Izuku flipped off Scorpion's head and right in front of Wash. Man, that guy's head was as thick as it looked. You okay, Wash? Spider-Man. Wash did a small sigh of relief. Behind you, your head. Izuku moved his head to the side, just in time for Scorpion's tail to miss it. The vigilante jumped back, putting some distance between him and the villain. Spider-Man. Scorpion scowled. Man, you're still walking after that. You really are thick-headed. Izuku quipped. Although under the mask he was quite nervous. That almost killed me. This guy is faster than your average villain. Tougher too. I need to be careful. Stay out of this wall crawler. Scorpion hissed at him. This is between me and the fake. Izuku felt a bit of anger rise up in him at that. Fake? You think he's a fake hero? Of course he is. All he does is show off to kids. He's on cereal, TV shows, toys, and he's rarely actually defeated a villain. And yet he gets to be in the top 10. Scorpion shouted, his words dripping venom and full of hate. He's proof that our hero society is corrupt and needs to be destroyed. Okay, smart guy, tell me this. If he's a fake hero, then how come he stayed here and distracted you while getting all the civilians away to safety? Izuku asked him with a bit of an edge in his voice. Scorpion looked around and saw that the once crowded street was empty, and some people were in Wash's bubbles, being moved back behind a police perimeter. What? When did he? Like I said, he did it while distracting you. Even though he's not a combat-based hero, he's a support and rescue hero, which is why he hasn't taken down a lot of villains, Izuku explained firmly, his voice being loud enough to be heard by the people in the media behind the perimeter. But he knew that there are no other heroes in the area, so he risked his life to fight you on his own, something he is notoriously bad at doing, so that way he could make sure everyone around him got away. Does that sound like a fake hero to you? 𝐔𝐬𝐽. Scorpion recoiled back as if Izuku's worst physically hit him before he leaned forward, and his shock was replaced by pure rage. Why you what? Can't handle being wrong? Izuku taunted. Because that's what you and your precious Stain are. Wrong. Even if there are some heroes that lower the standard and don't deserve the title, psychopaths like you two don't get to decide who is and isn't a fake. And you definitely don't decide that people should die over it. Shut up. Scorpion lunged at Izuku, and the green-haired teen got ready to fight. Spidey jump, Wash shouted from behind him. Izuku didn't know what Wash had planned, but he was a high-ranking hero, so he thought it was best to go along with it. He jumped high into the air, allowing Wash to shoot out a giant bubble at Scorpion that encapsulated him and floated him into the air. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Enough of this. Scorpion popped the bubble, but now he was in a free fall, and he was a sitting duck. Izuku shot a web line at the villain, who couldn't dodge at all, and then slammed him into the ground, hard. Crack. Scorpion smacked face first into the ground so hard that it broke apart the road. 𝐔𝐬𝐽. You little Scorpion tried to pull himself up, but as he did, Izuku yanked the line forward, causing him to fly right into Izuku's fist, promptly knocking the villain out cold. See what I mean? He does support, and I'll have you know, he's really good at his job. Izuku said out loud. Thanks for assisting Spider-Man. I was in big trouble there. Wash told him. Yeah, you're welcome, but aren't you gonna try and arrest me? Izuku nervously scratched the back of his head. He'd said all that good stuff about Wash, and he didn't want to make him look bad by easily escaping him. Didn't you hear? I'm a support and rescue hero. I don't do combat well, Wash told him as he walked away. Just as Izuku was about to swing away, the media stormed in and went right for Izuku, making a dense crowd around the poor teen before assaulting him with questions. Spider-Man, why did you become a vigilante? Asked one of the reporters. Why not use your powers to become a hero? Asked another one. Who are you under the mask? Asked one bold and kinda stupid reporter. They kept pelting him with questions, and Izuku briefly became overwhelmed before regaining his composure. Calm down, Izuku. You're not weak, timid Deku right now. You're the strong, confident Spider-Man. Izuku took a deep breath before turning his Spider-Man persona back on. Hey. One question at a time. I get everyone wants a piece of me, but there's only so much to go around. Part of him wanted to just swing away, but if he wanted to get a hero license, he had to be popular, and the press might help him with that. So he'd answer a few questions and then leave. Where did you get your gear? Asked a female reporter. One day you go from barefoot with a shabby costume, and then next day, this. What happened? Oh, boy, was a certain someone waiting for this question. That'd be all thanks to the Tinkerer, a support gear prodigy working exclusively for vigilantes. Izuku answered, trying to make it sound like an advertisement to appease Niku. So if any other law-enforcing lawbreakers want to get themselves a spiffy new costume, get in touch. The press sure ate that up. The idea that there was a secret dealer for vigilante support items was a juicy piece of news. Earlier we heard you defending Wash's honor. What are your opinions on pro-heroes? Asked another reporter. Defending Wash's honor. It was never in danger. What, just because that chucklehead said some rude nonsense? I've seen more valid criticisms of heroes in a YouTube comments section. If we acted like every time someone said something like this it put someone's honor in danger, then everyone would have their honor in danger at all times, Izuku said, easily dismissing Scorpion's words. And what do I think about heroes? They're great. They save people, they stop villains. What's not to love, even if they try to arrest you? A reporter asked. Izuku shrugged. They're heroes. I'm a vigilante. What are they gonna do? Not try and arrest me? As much as I would appreciate it, I have to be realistic here. What do you think about Stain's ideology? About how some heroes don't act in ways befitting of their titles? Asked another reporter. Izuku paused for a second to think about this. When he'd first heard about Stain's ideology, he simply brushed it off as the mutterings of a lunatic. And while he did still think Stain was a lunatic, Bakugo's death had opened his eyes to the possibility that maybe heroes aren't all infallible. And his time as Spider-Man only helped further plant that idea in Izuku's head. No one is perfect, was Izuku's conclusion. The world likes to portray heroes as if they're gods, untouchable, infallible, and unquestionable. But they're not. They're human above all else. So like every other human, they make mistakes. It's inevitable. And it's scary. It's scary to think that the heroes aren't all-knowing and all-powerful. It's scary to think that they won't save us, or that they can't save us. Izuku was getting flashbacks to Bakugo's death. His friend died because of a mistake. On both the hero's part and his, Stain's ideology is completely unrealistic. He wants heroes to be beyond human, to never make mistakes, and he thinks the punishment for failing this should be death. Izuku said, I don't think I need to explain how sick and twisted that is. And even if some heroes don't deserve to be called heroes, even if he has a point, do we really think we should leave that decision up to killers like Stain? The press was eating this up, but as they looked back at Izuku, he suddenly saw fear in their eyes. Behind you, the head. What? Izuku turned around and saw that Scorpion had gotten back up, and his tail was once again heading right for his face. Izuku leaned back, barely able to avoid the attack in time, but the tip of his tail caught onto Izuku's mask, and as Izuku dodged the attack, Scorpion's tail pulled his mask off. Scorpion grinned for a moment, thinking that at least he revealed Izuku's identity. However, that grin didn't even stay on his face for a second, as a look of deep confusion replaced it when he saw Izuku's face. What the ga? In the moment while Scorpion was frozen in shock, Izuku rushed forward and punched him in the face so hard it sent the man's teeth flying as blood flew out of his nose. Scorpion went flying back a dozen feet, and with fearful adrenaline rushing through his veins, Izuku didn't slow down. Before Scorpion even hit the ground, Izuku shot a web line at his mask and pulled back to him, quickly putting it back on his face. Then when Scorpion actually reached the floor, Izuku rapidly started webbing him to the ground, using way more webbing than necessary. With that done, Izuku immediately jumped 20 feet into the air and swung away as fast as he could. 100 failure. One might call it an old friend for Izuku. He was a Deku after all. Just when he thought he was getting used to success, failure shows its ugly head back up in Izuku's life in the worst of ways. Just like he failed to be born with a quirk, he failed to save Kaken, and he failed to not be caught committing vigilantism. Now he had failed to keep his secret identity. This is what led to Izuku sobbing in the center of his training room in the abandoned factory, still in his costume, although now without his mask on. Out of all his previously mentioned mess-ups, this was his least egregious. But that didn't mean much, and it was still going to make his and his mother's life exponentially harder. As Izuku was sobbing, Niku walked up to him with a laptop folded under her arm. Hey Spider, you need to check this out. Not now, Niku, Izuku said very quietly in a sad, depressed tone. Niku wasn't taking no for an answer, however, and so she just opened the laptop and played a video, even without Izuku looking. Breaking news. Earlier today, a villain known as the Scorpion attacked the rescue hero Wash. The newswoman said, the hero fought valiantly against the villain, distracting him while getting all the surrounding people to safety. Things were looking dire until the vigilante Spider-Man showed up and defeated the villain. However, as he was surprisingly addressing the press for once, the villain got back up and removed Spider-Man's mask. Izuku cringed as he heard that. I should have webbed him to the ground. I got too reliant on my spider sense. However, much to everyone's surprise, there seemed to be nothing underneath. The newswoman finished. Izuku's eyes widened in shock when he heard that, and his head turned so fast to look at the computer it was surprising that he didn't break his neck. There on the news was him without his mask on, but instead of his face being there, it was seemingly just empty space. He saw his headless body take down Scorpion and put his mask back on before webbing up Scorpion and leaving. Niku rewinded it to the part where Izuku had just lost his mask and paused it, allowing Izuku to gaze at the image in shock. So I'm guessing you didn't know you could do that. What? No, what? Izuku had been competently shaken out of his depression and was now completely in shock. Since when could he turn invisible? Since when could spiders turn invisible? All right, do it again, Niku demanded. Izuku was caught off guard by this sudden demand. Go invisible, Niku repeated, about more aggressively. I'll need to adjust your costume, so I need to know what I'm working with. Izuku just looked confused. He had no idea he could even do that, let alone know how to turn it on and off. Niku sighed and started digging through her lab coat pocket. I thought this might be the case. And then she pulled out a gun and pointed it at Izuku's face. You have 2 seconds, she told him, her voice dead serious. Wait, there's no way she's gonna. Izuku's thoughts were interrupted by his spider sense going off. Oh my god, she's serious. Just as Niku was about to pull the trigger, Izuku's head turned invisible. As I suspected, Niku pulled her finger away from the trigger. It seems your invisibility is not something meant to be done on command, but rather it's a self-defense mechanism your body activates automatically when it feels it's in extreme danger. Much like Niku said, the moment Niku was no longer going to shoot Izuku and his spider sense stopped blaring, Izuku's face returned to being visible. And as she put away the gun, Izuku finally got out of shock. You are going to shoot me? Izuku was honestly more shocked than angry, but he was still a bit miffed that his supposed partner had no qualms about shooting him point blank in the face. Niku rolled her eyes. Of course I was. You told me how your spider sense works, remember? I knew if I just bluffed it wouldn't cause you to react. And relax, it was a rubber bullet. It would have been like getting hit with a tennis ball for you. Now take off your glove. It took Izuku a few seconds to respond, having to take in what she just told him. But he did hesitantly comply and removed his glove, exposing his hand. All right, now, try and remember that feeling of danger and panic, Niku instructed him. Izuku closed his eyes and tried to remember what it was like. His mask was coming off. Behind him was an army of press. It was over. His secret identity was out. He'd made another massive mistake. You're doing it. It's flickering, Niku told him. Izuku opened his eyes, but in doing so, broke his concentration, and all he saw was his perfectly visible hand. All right, now try it again. This time with your eyes open, Niku instructed. All right. Izuku stared at his hand and tried to focus on another stressful, anxiety-filled memory. This time he went back to the alleyway where he encountered Eraserhead. Just when he realized that a hero had seen him committing vigilantism, he thought his life was over, that his dreams had been firmly crushed, and that he had broken his promise to Kaken. And that's when his hand vanished. It was only for a moment, because when Izuku saw this, his concentration broke, and therefore his hand immediately turned visible again. Okay, looks like you can trick your body into thinking that it's in danger. However, it looks like this requires extreme levels of concentration, Niku noted. You'll want to train that. This could be very useful in the future. I guess. But how am I going to use it while in my costume? Izuku asked. While I'm wearing clothes, this part of my quirk is completely useless. It's probably activated a few times, and I just never noticed it because of that reason. Niku shook her head in annoyance. I'll just have to add chameleon tech to your costume. Chameleon tech, Izuku repeated with confusion. What's that? I've never heard about it before. That's not a surprise. Niku sighed. Chameleon tech is a special stealth technology that, while on its own, only creates subpar camouflage when combined with someone who has an invisibility or camouflage quirk. Makes the user entirely invisible. And the reason you've never heard of it is because the support gear industry is filled entirely with perverts, and they have been trying to bury this technology ever since it was discovered, deliberately obscuring it from the public eye, removing articles about it online, and purposely making that technology hard to find and obtain. And if you work inside the support industry and try to blow the whistle, you can look forward to getting blacklisted. Wait a minute. There aren't even that many female heroes who have invisibility or camouflage quirks. The support industry would really do that much just to make sure a couple of dozen heroes go around showing off their body, which they can't see. Izuku was actually astounded by that much perversion. Firstly, it's not just the female heroes. Male heroes also get treated this way. Remember, girls can be perverts too. Like my sister, who has gotten suspended for sexual misconduct multiple times, Niku corrected, while also taking the opportunity to slander her sister. And secondly, if you're going to be part of the support industry, even temporarily, then never underestimate the power of perverts. Niku started walking back to the workshop while urging Izuku to follow her. Even though I say that the technology is slowly coming out more and more, and becoming more available, Niku explained, it's only a matter of time until its existence becomes public. That being said, someone like me can't just order it online. I'll have to make it from scratch. Some of the components are a bit too sophisticated to make it from the scrap on the beach. I'll have to ask my parents for some of the materials. Are you sure you can manage it? It seems pretty complicated. Izuku stopped and thought about it for a moment. Actually, how are you this smart? Do you have an intelligence quirk or something? You could say that. My quirk is called download, Niku explained with a prideful smirk on her face. Whenever I touch an object with all 5 of my fingers, every possible use that object has will be downloaded into my head. Izuku's eyes widened, and he quickly pulled out a notebook and started jotting down notes. That's amazing. With a quirk like that, you're theoretically capable of making, well, everything that can be made. But a powerful quirk like that has to have some major drawbacks. Correct, she confirmed. You see, my quirk is exceptionally hard to use. My brain can only handle so much information at once before I start getting massive headaches. And I mean massive. It feels like your head is getting hit by a train. And while I can kind of choose what information goes into my brain, it is also difficult to control. It's like searching for something on the internet, but the results are pretty much everything related to what you're looking for, and you have to search through it all manually. Also, any information gained through my quirk will vanish in about 5 minutes, hence all the papers scattered about everywhere. Izuku wrote down everything she said, intensely. So many drawbacks, which makes sense because of the sheer power of the quirk itself. Still, using that kind of quirk effectively must take a lot of hard work. I knew you were impressive, but not like this. Niku was practically glowing from the praise. I'm aware of my own greatness. Nice to hear someone else confirm it for once though. Anyway, let's get to work. So, what did you want to show me? Izuku asked Niku as he stood in her office. These. Niku took out a plastic bag that was filled with a bunch of small spider-shaped devices. Spider trackers. Attach one of these on a villain and their location will be uploaded onto the HUD of your costume. I'll have access to their locations as well. That's amazing. Izuku quickly took the trackers and smiled at them, knowing a villain's exact location. This will be amazing for ambushes. Suddenly Niku's phone started vibrating. She picked up, read something on it, before looking back up at Izuku. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 is chasing a B-class villain through the streets nearby. If you move fast, you should be able to intercept them. Right. Izuku quickly ran out of the room, going to don his costume once again. 110 come back here villain. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 was starting to get tired of this fucker. B-class villain. Kangaroo had robbed an ATM and was running away with a bag of money. Or rather, running and jumping away. His quirk, super legs, made his legs extremely powerful. A simple quirk, but very effective. Kangaroo was parkouring around the city. All the other heroes had already lost track of him, and 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 was also starting to lose pace, getting farther and farther from his target. Get lost, heroes. You can't catch me. Kangaroo shouted out. He jumped from the street to the top of a car, to the side of a building, and then into the air, about to jump back onto the street. However, suddenly Izuku dove down from the building and tried to punch Kangaroo's lights out. Fortunately for the villain, Izuku missed slightly, his fist grazing the villain's back as the kangaroo managed to narrowly pass Izuku's lunge. Phew. Kangaroo got really nervous when he saw Izuku diving for him, but as he quickly hopped away, seeing Spider-Man and 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 getting farther and farther, he was more confident that he got away scot-free. Meanwhile, 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 had finally run out of steam and came to a stop, rapidly trying to catch his breath, while Izuku stood beside him, making no effort to chase after the villain. You okay? Izuku asked the tired hero. Sorry, I don't really have any grape juice. I do have a few energy bars. I'm fine. The villain, he's getting away. Tensei didn't like putting this matter into the hands of a vigilante, but he liked leaving a dangerous criminal on the streets even less. For now, remember that dive I did? Well, I thought just in case I missed him, I'd try to attach one of these to him. Izuku took out a spider tracker, a tracking device. Tensei asked, exactly. I figured that catching him may be a bit tricky, so instead I'll just wait till he's inside and spring an ambush on him. Izuku explained. Oh, so, that energy bar? Tensei inquired. 90. After making sure he lost the heroes, Kangaroo had made it to his small apartment hideout. Hehe. Kangaroo sat down on his torn-up couch and took out something from his pocket. The diamond. He'd found this pretty little gem in a jewelry store, as one would, and after he liberated it, that is when he got into his chase with the heroes. Now, how to pawn this thing? Kangaroo stood up and started pacing around the room, admiring his stolen gem. And then he made the mistake of standing in front of the window. Crash. Suddenly Izuku burst through the window and kicked Kangaroo to the floor. YGH. Kangaroo didn't have any time to react or get off the floor before Izuku stomped his head through the floor, knocking him unconscious. Izuku picked up the unconscious villain and flipped him on his back, where he placed the tracer. Spider tracers worked like a charm. Of course they did. I'm building a brand, you know. What would it do to my reputation if I gave you faulty equipment? Niku asked. Probably nothing because you're blackmailing me. Izuku pointed out. I mean, yeah, but you get the point, Niku said. The police should be there in a few minutes, so web him and leave. Right. Izuku threw the villain up to the ceiling and webbed him to it, leaving his legs dangling in the air. Why don't you just hang out? I really need to get better at these. And with his business done, Izuku jumped out the window and swung away. 110. After changing out of his costume, Izuku made his way home, going through the front door, and immediately he smelled his mother's cooking. I'm so glad my identity hasn't gotten exposed. Izuku could have only imagined what would have happened if he didn't have that invisibility power. If his face really had been shown on live TV, he couldn't show his face again, couldn't come home again, couldn't see his mother again, couldn't eat her cooking again. Izuku needed to be more careful in the future. I'm home. The green teen called out to his mother. Welcome back home, dear. Just sit down on the couch. Dinner will be done soon. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 told him. Izuku grinned and quickly dove for the couch, shooting a web at the remote to bring it to him before turning on the TV to watch the news. Breaking news. B-class villain Kangaroo had committed a robbery. During his escape, several heroes had attempted to give chase, most notably 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵, as well as the vigilante Spider-Man. However, while the villain did seemingly escape, he was later captured by Spider-Man. How Spider-Man tracked down the villain was revealed in an interview with 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵. The camera switched to show 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 on the streets, talking to a reporter. Yeah, so apparently Spider-Man has tracking devices. Probably made that Tinkerer person he was talking about. Guess the Tinkerer is no joke. Tensei said. Sir, witness report that you made no attempts to stop or capture Spider-Man when he arrived. Why is that? One reporter asked. I was already exhausted. and he is Spider-Man, not someone you want to try catching when you're not at 100%. He explained, "It's been noted that many other heroes have also not pursued Spider-Man, instead choosing to ignore this vigilante. Do you know why this is?" Another reporter asked. "Well," Tensei sighed, "that comes down to a few reasons. Firstly, do you know how fast Spider-Man goes? The guy can outrun most cars and some trains, both on foot and with his webs. Most heroes can't go that fast. And secondly, he can maneuver through the air. A lot of heroes just can't reach him. And when you combine that with his ridiculous speed, and it means that like 70% of heroes just can't catch him at all. And let's say you do catch up to him. Then what? You then have to subdue a guy who deadlifts buses and move like a bullet. Also, I heard he can turn invisible now. Not really sure what's up with that, but we can add it to the list of things that make Spider-Man hard to catch. Add that all up, and you can see that the vast majority of heroes just don't have a way of dealing with him on their own. So they have to ask themselves if it's worth it to try and go catch him. You don't think catching a highly dangerous, high-profile vigilante like Spider-Man is worth it?" asked another reporter. "Honestly, for most people, no," Tensei answered, knowing very well that he was going to be hearing about this statement for a while. "Listen, if you're All Might, or Endeavor, or Hawks, then yes, you should go out of your way to take him down, because they're capable of doing so. But for most heroes, chasing him down is a waste of time, because you're not going to catch him. And as a hero, if you waste time, people could die. And it's not like Spider-Man is much a menace anyway. He's never killed anyone, never let a civilian get hurt during his escapades, and has caused very little property damage during his fights. Really, the most damage you can say he's caused is to the villains themselves, with many of them having broken bones as a result of his punches. But considering what we've seen of his strength, the fact that he hasn't killed anyone speaks to his skill. And it's a huge shame he became a vigilante, because I easily see someone like getting into the top 10. Izuku was so torn when he heard this. On one hand, holy crap, 𝗔𝗵𝗲 was praising his skill, and had even said he could have gotten into the top 10. Could have. Of course, 𝗔𝗵𝗲 was still looking at him like a vigilante. A highly skilled and powerful vigilante. Someone the heroes would have to take down. He was still far from the point where people were crying out to let him into the hero course. Izuku knew he still had a lot of work ahead of him. 110 AHHH. Help, help, crash. 𝐔𝐬𝐚𝐿 screamed out in pain as he was smashed through a building and into a car. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 was covered in bruises and cuts, including a big bleeding gash in his side, and several parts of his costume were torn and broken. In other words, he had taken quite the beating. And the one who had given him that beating was currently climbing through the building he just punched through. He was 8 feet tall, with an entirely gray and extremely muscular body. He wore only a pair of brown shorts, and he had a huge horn on top of his head. This was the rank villain, Rhino. "You dead hero," Rhino shouted out, as he stamped his foot and got ready to charge. "Shit," 𝗵𝐴 cursed, as he tried to pull himself up. But Rhino was already charging at him, and as he came closer, 𝗵𝐴 only saw death approaching. THWIP. And suddenly, a web line hit 𝗵𝐴's chest, and he was pulled into the air, narrowly avoiding death at the horn of Rhino, as the villain ran through the car, tearing it apart, before he slammed into the opposite building, going right through it like a wrecking ball. 𝗵𝐴 was confused, as he found himself being lifted up to the roof of a building, where he came mask to mask with Izuku. Spider-Man, in the flesh, Izuku tried to quip, but 𝗵𝐴 could very clearly make out the anxiety and fear in his voice. "I'd love to get you back for what happened last time, but it seems like I may need your help." "I can see that." Izuku looked down and saw that Rhino was slowly climbing out of the hole he made in the building. "But you're too injured to take him on." "I can still fight," 𝗵𝐴 insisted, forcing himself onto his feet, but he was clearly struggling. "I am a hero, I have to save the people." Izuku interrupted him. "One more hit from that guy and you're dead. And you can't help anyone like that. Focus on evacuating the people still in the area. I'll take on Rhino. He's tough. I could barely even scratch him." "Do you think you can take him?" 𝗵𝐴 asked, his tone reflecting the weight of the situation. Izuku paused for a second before answering. "We'll see. I'll keep him away from the people. Go." And with that, Izuku jumped onto the roof and onto the back of Rhino, who had just been looking around wondering where 𝗵𝐴 went. Hey, they're tall, gray, and ugly. The name's Spider-Man. I'll be kicking your butt today," Izuku said in the cockiest tone he could muster. "Get off me." Rhino reached up to pull Izuku off his back, but Izuku jumped off into the air, doing a flip before landing on all fours a few feet away from Rhino. "Man, you are so slow. No wonder you're endangered." Izuku silently apologized to all the endangered rhinos for that joke. "𝗬𝗲𝗏, why you little..." Rhino got ready to change, but Izuku quickly webbed his huge feet to the ground. "What the... 𝗬𝗲𝗏, get this off of me." Rhino tried to raise his legs, and the webbing was doing its best to keep him from doing so, but it was getting stretched out by Rhino's strength, and it might not hold long. so Izuku just unloaded a massive web barrage on Rhino, going from his feet up, webbing up his legs, making it even harder for him to move. Then Izuku got closer and started jumping around, webbing Rhino up at all angles, webbing his arms to his side to keep him from moving them, until his entire body, except for his head, was webbed up in a giant web cocoon. "Let me out," Rhino shouted as he struggled to try and get out of the web. "Nuwa, you still haven't eaten your dinner." Izuku flipped in front of Rhino and cocked his arm back. "A plate full of knuckle sandwiches." Wham! Izuku punched Rhino in the face at full power, knowing he wouldn't need to hold back. And sure enough, after that crack to the face, Rhino seemed only mildly hurt, more pissed off than injured really. And so Izuku hit him again. Wham! And again. Wham! And again. Wham! Izuku's fist pounded down on Rhino's face like cannonballs being shot out of a machine gun. He was hitting him so fast that to the people around who 𝐒𝐭𝐲𝐽 was evacuating, it looked like he made multiple arms. Rhino's face was getting more and more injured, his nose bleeding, bruises forming, and even a few teeth flying out. The villain got angrier and angrier with each punch, and with this anger he found a bit of extra strength. "Watch out." Izuku's eyes widened as his spider sense warned him that Rhino was about to attack. But unfortunately, he was already mid-swing, and it took him too long to cancel his attack. 𝐷𝗵𝗃𝗃. Rhino's arms burst free and smacked Izuku back. 𝐔𝐬𝐽. Izuku was launched back a few dozen feet before crashing into a car. Rhino had hit him so hard that it took a few seconds for Izuku to snap back to reality. "Ugh." Izuku sat up and felt a pain on the right side of his chest, where he had been hit. "I think he broke a rib." Suddenly Izuku felt the ground shaking, and his spider sense blaring, and he looked up to see Rhino charging at him. Izuku was about to jump up to avoid the attack. But just when he was standing up to do that, his spider sense buzzed even harder. "People behind you." Izuku glanced behind him and saw that a good distance away was a police line, with a bunch of civilians watching from behind it. If he just jumped over, then Rhino might crash into the people. He looked back at Rhino, and he had about 5 seconds to figure out what to do before Rhino charged him, horn first. And so in a panic, Izuku charged right back at him. When the two were only a foot apart, Rhino leaned down to try and impale Izuku with his horn, but Izuku had a plan. He ducked down as low as he could, going under Rhino's head, and then rising back up, grabbing his chest. Then, he used Rhino's own forward momentum to launch him into the air. Crash! Rhino landed a few feet away, the impact of his massive body hitting the street, making a small crater. Izuku jumped up into the air, over Rhino, and started raining webs onto him, sticking him to the ground for a bit, before Izuku shot a web line right next to Rhino's face. "Spider smash!" Izuku shouted, as he yanked down on the web as hard as he could, sending him hurtling down at high speeds, while he cocked back his fist. Smash! Izuku's fist hit Rhino's face with monumental force. The power of this one blow made winds gush around him and kicked up a massive cloud of dust and debris, as Rhino was sent deep into the ground and cracks formed in the surrounding street. When the cloud of dust dispersed, the people saw Izuku, standing triumphantly over an unconscious Rhino. Although if you took a closer look, you could see Izuku panting and exhausted. That last punch had taken a bit out of him, so he had to take a second to breathe. Meanwhile, 𝐭𝐲𝐽 was not too far away, looking on at Izuku in shock as he stood over the defeated villain. He had known that Spider-Man has been rapidly upping his game since they met, going from taking on nameless thugs to C-class villains, to B-class villains, and now he had taken down an A-class villain. It was scary how fast this kid was progressing. And so when Spider-Man started swinging away, 𝐭𝐲𝐽 just watched. He was in no condition to pursue him. And besides, he should stay to make sure no one was trapped in the destroyed buildings anyway.